I've seen a lot of bankers, and I've seen a lot of cops. I've seen a lot of lawyers pull out all the stops. I've seen a lot of children with their parents in their hands. I've built a lot of women who refuse to understand. Well, I don't think I understand why we're making such a fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take the world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. You see it in the papers, you read it every day. The riots and the fires going on in South LA. The muggers and the government, they're all wanting the same thing. Well, I don't think I understand why we're making such a fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take the world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. Take me. Guitar Players Planet. 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 Sunny skies, the smell of palm tree air. Looking back, I could never feel fair. The way the music has touched my soul, the way that the South holds its control. But I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to the land of the new.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey.
We're back again. How's it going, guys? We got Jason out in Albuquerque tonight, and then we got Eric still hanging out in the Chicago suburbs.
Yep.
and then we got me. So tonight we got a special guest tonight. We haven't had one in a while. Tonight our guest needs no introduction. He's been on the show before, but we're gonna give him one anyway. So our special guest tonight has an astronomy and physics BS, and after that he joined Kitt Peak Observatory and helped actually mold the Kitt Peak public outreach for 9 years. Then he moved on, and in 2007 he actually founded the Mount Lemmon Sky Center for the University of Arizona. As an astrophotographer, his images could be seen in Astronomy, Sky and Tell, National Geographic, and Scientific American. He has over 90 APODs, and he's received a 2012 Hubble Award for special contributions to the field of astroimaging, and he actually has an asteroid named after him. So let's welcome him to the show, Adam Block. I hope that wasn't too much. But
I like the
Matt,
here.
your second appearance.
We are not worthy.
You got the we're not worthy from the guys.
Okay.
So Thank you so much for coming back and welcome.
Yeah, well,
Yes, welcome,
thank you
definitely.
for having me. Yeah, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be able to, spend some time and talk about this kind of stuff. And it's wonderful that these kinds of venues for doing that exist. In astrophotography, it's kind of a niche thing, but here we are talking about all the fun things we can do as part of this hobby.
Well, we
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
appreciate you taking the time out and joining us here on AstroWorld TV. So this is a treat for me because you are one of as far as Pix Insight and for aspiring astro imagers and amateur astronomers, they see your stuff on all these different magazines. So you are like you're a celebrity when it comes to this stuff.
I don't know about
So
celebrity.
it's pretty cool.
I've been doing it for a while, though. I think that that's really the thing that is, if it's worth mentioning, it's a fact that, geez, I've been doing this for 25 years or whatever it is. So in that sense, yeah, I've been around a while doing this.
Well, we
But I
really
think
appreciate you coming on.
yeah, thank you. The reason that I was coming on, though, I was inspired actually to do so by you, Eric. You made that call, at least to me, that said, I really need to go on the show. And the reason is because some of the things that you were saying on the last show, I happened to catch a good fraction of the last program. And I think I'd like to address some of those things, especially with regards to PixInsight and WBPP, just because that's a new thing in the program. And I think it's one of the most influential things in the program, something that very many users are going to use, and it'll be their introduction in some sense to PixInsight because it's a pre-processing thing that you need to do. And so for all of those reasons, I guess it came up in the last program in your conversations, and I'm like, oh, this is something I'm really interested in. In fact, I had this wonderful opportunity to work with the developer, Roberto Sartori, who implemented these new features and this new way to use WBPP. And so obviously I'm very, animated about this particular thing.
Mm-hmm. So you've been really involved with development of and working with this script for, from almost its inception, what I say?
No. This is
no.
I'm really late to the game, but I had this wonderful conversation early on with Roberto about some of the things that I thought were could be either improved or done differently. I had a little influence, and he saw some of the things that because he knows how to program it, right? He knows actually how to implement all this stuff.
Yeah,
He saw a number of ways forward, and he included some really creative ways of doing some of what I had envisioned that would be cool, and he came up with some just fantastic ways to do that, and I'd like to show that.
Yeah, awesome.
But let me go ahead and start with the inspiration for coming on the program. I'm gonna
yes, please.
Let's see. Do I want to start by sharing my screen? No, I'm going to start by just explaining the idea, and then I'll share my screen. So this applies not only to, you might think this is about PixInsight, but it's not. This is really about two things. It's about softwares that need to do some kind of pre-processing on astronomical images. I mean, that's just a fundamental part of taking care of business. And then there's this other thing of the way in which people learn, because there's always going to be, new users to a program or new people who are new to the idea of how to work with astronomical data. And that process is tough. It's just, there's a certain level of complexity that comes along with understanding the calibration of astronomical data. And it's very hard to demonstrate that or teach that. And that's part of what I do, right? Is I create these instructional videos that show how to do things. And one of the things that I've learned, and I think I've learned most recently, is that people really want in general, and I can show you, I can show you the conversations. It's amazing. But I really got this now. People really want to know the steps, not because the steps to, say, pre-processing, the steps to beginning to do astronomical image processing, not so much because they want, they just want a recipe per se. It's not the recipe that interests most people. They want to get to a point where they get to play, where they get to make the artistic decisions, where they get to do the things that seem fun. You get to see the color picture. You want to adjust the saturation, the contrast. You want to look at the image and see the cool things that you've captured with the telescope and all of that stuff. And that all makes sense. But you got to get through this dealing with the data first, of combining all the information and making sure it's all calibrated properly. And so what I learned is that if you try to teach all of the stuff that's going on in the calibration process, pre-processing, this means using darks and flats and biases and when you use them and when you don't use them, and some of the math that you just need to know, you know what to look for if it's not calibrated properly. If you explain all of that, it becomes a very complex subject. And then so people want, don't tell me all that, just show me the steps, so I'll learn that as I go along, right?
Sure.
And so the other way is to don't explain anything. You just say, and that's what's out there on YouTube, right? And that's what you'll find on websites. Here are the steps. Sometimes they'll write information why they're doing those steps, but it may not be as inclusive as you might want, because so many people have so many different configurations. But here are the steps, do these things. And that kind of works, except when, those steps are not fully inclusive or correct sometimes. And if you don't know why those steps are not inclusive or correct, then you're back at that same problem. So here's the argument. Coming back to PixInsight, WBPP, this script, which is all about pre-processing, I think now reaches a good compromise, because it does two things. It shows you the steps, and it also gives you some feedback as to why you're doing the steps. It actually tells you a little bit of information. And I think that is a really good middle ground, because there aren't very many tools that you can use that somehow teach a little bit of information or demonstrate or speak to you in some way. When you're doing the manual processing in PixInsight or any other program, there really is no feedback that says, this might not be the right thing to do. But in WBPP, there's a little bit of that. And so I'm really inspired by that idea that it can now serve as a way to teach, is a way to demonstrate, it's a way to make it a little bit easier to do the pre-processing. So now I'm going to share my screen.
Sure.
Okay.
No, I don't know what that did. That turned off my video. Toggle screen sharing. That's what, okay. So
there you go.
Yeah, I'm like infinite. I'll do, yeah. There we go. Am I sharing infinity?
Yep.
Okay.
Now you're in there. Yes, now we see.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. So what I want to do is let me just bring up the thing, which is WBPP. I didn't quite get there. Let's try that again. I'm so excited that I can't click on it. All right. So for those people that are already familiar with the program, there's no real change in what you see as far as these panels are concerned. So again, this is all about pre-processing. This is all about using flats and darks and biases and all of that information. So all this stuff still looks the same where you load the fundamental stuff, darks and biases and flats and so on. Then there's this extra tab, which is the control panel. And this is what speaks to you. And it speaks in a number of different ways, which are really instructive. And that's what I'd like to kind of demonstrate here.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what the best way forward is before I get too far into things, because I know I can start talking about a gazillion things here. Yeah, so I think here's what I want to show you. I want to just show you how it can communicate to you. These are the groups. So this is a light frame group. Do you see it says light here, flat here, dark here, and bias here? So each of these areas are basically the same as what you see in these panels. It's just the panels show you the individual files. Here, they're just grouped together. And when you look at a group, if I click on a group like this, what lights up are the calibration frames that are in play, that are being matched with whatever it is that we're trying to calibrate. So when you have a light frame, you have to use a flat field image, and you have to use a dark frame. And so it is doing this job of matching the image that you are wanting to calibrate with these other items. And that's what's kind of nice, because when you press this little button here, it shows you what's going on. Now I'm going to simplify this by doing the following thing. Let me just do something kind of crazy here. There. So when I have it in this configuration here, what you can see is that it says that I have a light frame, and it's going to subtract this dark frame from it. That's what it shows here in this little flow diagram. And it's also going to apply this 0.0 second a flat field image to it, and then that gives me a calibrated light. So this little diagram shows me everything that I need to see going on. If this doesn't say 301 seconds like this one does, then I know something's wrong. Or if it doesn't show up at all in the calibration diagram, I know it's wrong.
Yeah.
And this is no different than what's being displayed here. You know, by having little things lit up as in green, it's actually giving me the same information, which is also being shown here. I'm seeing that I'm using a dark and a flat to calibrate my light. I'm using only a dark here, which is not correct, by the way. This is a wrong configuration, but I'm using this dark to calibrate my flat field image. You'll notice that there's a status little thing here. It's trying to tell me something. What it's saying is, hey, buddy, look what you're doing. You're trying to subtract a 300-second exposure, dark frame exposure, from your 0.07 second flat field image. Is this really what you want to do? And so it's telling you that there is a way to do what you want to do. You can do this thing called optimization, which if you give me a chance, I'll be happy to talk about a little bit later. Or you can do this other thing, which I will now do. Hopefully I'm still in the directory. Yeah, I am. The other thing to do is that if you have the right kind of sensor, not all sensors can you do this. If you have a sensor that's well behaved, and I'd like to show you what that means in just a moment, but if you have a sensor that's well behaved, you can, instead of using a dark frame to calibrate the flats, you don't use a dark frame. You turn off the dark, and then what you're doing is you're using the bias frame. And you'll notice now when I click on my flat, notice how it's lighting up my bias here, right?
Yes.
That means that's being used. If I now look at my calibration diagram, I can see the flat is being calibrated by the bias, which is what I want. So that is now correct. So this now communicate, and I'm not using a dark. It has a no dark thing here. So now I can see that I'm using these items here for the light, and I'm using only the bias here for the flat field image to calibrate it. And this would be great. This is exactly what I want to do. Notice how in the other configuration, it didn't actually prevent me from doing the wrong thing, but it does offer me some warnings, because you can kind of sense that, wait, you're not using a matching dark, so you might need to take an action to do something else. Now, if we exit out of here and we look at the actual calibration, image calibration, Adam. Image identifier calibration, good. Now, this is the tool that's used in combination with another tool. You use this together with image, I can't think, integration. These are the two things that you would be using when you do the pre-processing manually. This is what you were talking about, Eric. In the last meeting, you said that a user could go through and do the following thing. The first thing they're going to do is they are going to, let's say they have a whole bunch of raw flat field images, right? They need to, well, I won't even start there. That's harder. Let me start with the easy one. They have a whole bunch of dark frames, okay? What they need to do with those dark frames is they need to integrate them together, right?
Correct.
Maybe, maybe not correct. Because if you look online, what you'll find is that people say, oh, well, maybe you need to subtract the bias from the dark before you integrate them together.
Okay.
So there's some confusion about that as to whether you check this little checkbox or not. And so what happens is, if you don't understand why you would be doing that and what the consequences of that are, that would need to be explained. Otherwise, you're just going to say, because someone else told me so, I'm going to check that box, or I'm not going to check the box. Now, let me do the flat field example, right? For a flat field, if you have raw flats, you need to create a master flat, just like we need to create a master dark, as I just described. You need to create a master flat. So when you create a master flat, you need to calibrate it, right?
Yes.
And then you're going to need to consider, are you going to calibrate it with a bias or another dark frame, which is fine. Those are perfectly reasonable things to do. And then you would know whether or not you need to press the check boxes. And then when you integrate a flat, Eric, what are the settings for integrating a flat field image? What do you put here?
Honestly,
now, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Right.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. But so don't answer. But what I'm about to explain is that you actually choose a different kind of normalization when you integrate flats compared to when you integrate biases or darks, right? And so normalization doesn't matter. You don't want it when you're doing darks and biases, but it does when you're doing flats and you choose multiplicative with scaling. For some reason, that would be terribly difficult to explain to a new user of image processing, of calibration, of PixInsight. This isn't a PixInsight thing, though. This is actually just mathematically what you should do to create a master flat.
Sure. Okay.
So I'm saying that there is a certain level of extra knowledge that if you want to know why you're doing these things, that becomes a challenge when you do the manual thing. Yes, you will learn by brute force if you actually do the steps and then learn why you're doing the steps. So WBPP for me then is a compromise where you don't need to know all the things about why, but you get to see the process of what is going on so that that unfolds better. My argument is that you could actually do WBPP first, and then this stuff is going to actually make more sense because you can see why you would need to calibrate or not calibrate over here, why you would need to do this integration in a different way, and so on. When you look at WBPP, let me just, now that I've used this as an example, here, the one thing when you do these, when you create masters using WBPP, those integration settings are already set for you. So you'll notice that you don't get to specify the normalization stuff here. So that is already hard coded into WBPP. When you do the flats here, that normalization, choosing that little special normalization thing, that's actually baked in. So that, I'm going to argue, is not important. And no first time user is going to think that, oh my gosh, I have to understand that now. They're just going to tell me the steps, Adam. Don't tell me what normalization and why you have to select this or don't select that, because that is tough. That's really, really a hard place to start. So that's why I'm arguing that WBPP is a compromise to seeing how the calibration process works. Okay. So with that in mind, now I'm going to show you a couple of things. First, I'm going to show you this. What I am arguing about here is something that then inspired a new thing that I've actually made. So I made this thing called fast track training, which is just an outgrowth of everything I've just described. It is a compromise of being able to explain why you do stuff without having that interfere with, just show me the steps so I can calibrate all my data and get to a point of having, say, a combined image that's a color image, so that then I can go play with the saturation and the contrast and do sharpening and masks and everything else you want to do, right? So this fast track training is exactly that. It shows not only the WBPP part, but it shows all of those steps, but in a philosophically different way than is typically done. It's not a recipe. What I show is what to look for in the data, how to actually look at the data so that you can see if there's a problem or if there's not a problem. And then you can anticipate what needs to happen next. So these are truly the steps, and they'll look very familiar to anyone who's done this. You might just look at the titles here and think, what could I possibly be saying that's any different than anyone else has ever said? And the devil is in the details here, because it's not just the steps. It's also how to look at the data and how that corresponds to the steps that you're doing. So that's what I really point out here in this new thing that I've made called Fast Track Training. And so my argument about WBPP is a small subset of what this is. And I have found that this way of demonstrating things is really popular. People really, really like it. I've had a wonderful response to it. And so that's why I feel emboldened to come on the show and challenge Eric with this idea that WBPP can be a teaching tool instead of just a script that does some mundane work, and you'll learn more if you do it manually. And I think I'm trying to shift that in a different way here. And that's one of the, it's only one facet of WBPP, but it's a facet that I really find very, very powerful. So
now, let
on
me
the
ask you
topic
this, Adam.
Oh yeah, please.
Now you've gone through WBPP when it comes to utilizing using bias frames. Now, what about some of us CMOS users who use flat darks? Where does that fall into play?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question, because that's why I'm on this screen. I will, in order to answer that question, first of all, I'm going to say that what I'm about to say, I probably say much better on my YouTube channel. So if you are not aware, I want to point out to all the listeners and anyone that would see this recording in the future, if you go to YouTube and me, Adam Block, I have created, I guess you can look at the playlist here, but I've created what I'm calling the definitive guide to WBPP, which is never going to be truly true, because it's going to constantly change, right? Everything changes.
Sure. Yeah.
But for the time being, for this moment,
yeah.
But for this moment, it really is true. And I think that it encapsulates not only WBPP, but some of these other ideas that I'm trying to express right now. The idea of, what calibration means, why you need to worry about, and I'll say the word, hopefully one last time, flat darks, things like that. I explain here, you'll even notice, and I'm going to show you my, how do I do this? I go to show more, and then I have a definitive guide. So for example, I say in part 4, calibration, flat darks explained here. I just put it there, right? And then I have examples, just like what you asked for, those of people that are using CMOS. Okay, if you have a CMOS camera and this is just a one-shot color camera, here's your example. If you have a CMOS camera and it's not a one-shot color and you use biases, here's what you look at. So I tried to do each of these kind of basic configurations so that you can see what it looks like. But what's really the important thing is what I'm about to explain. So the videos explain everything I'm about to say.
Okay.
And you'll recognize these PowerPoint slides. I don't know if I could actually play it or not, but I can show you. So here, you start fundamentally with what a bias frame is, which is just a short exposure, 0-second exposure. You're looking at the voltages on the chip when you download that information, right? So there's very little information potentially there, but it is an electronic signature of the chip. Then, here's what bias frame of my one of my cameras looks like. If you take a slightly longer exposure, though, then what happens is, through time, there's another activity that takes place. So you still have this electronic signature, but then through time, electrons just seem to accumulate out of nowhere. Now, they're not coming out of nowhere. It's an electronic activity. Electrons are actually being elevated to the conduction band just due to thermal reasons. The chip is at some temperature, and their kinetic energy of the little silicon atoms and everything in the bulk of the sensor make electrons go up to the conduction band, they move around, they go back down, they are collected in your pixels, where they are an extra source of a signal. Now, it's not a light signal, the shutter's closed, but it adds up through time, and it adds up in a linear way. So if you do twice the exposure, they're going to be accumulating these electrons at some particular rate through time. So you'll have twice the number in twice the amount of time that you might sit there and expose or take your dark frame. So there's no real distinction. This is what's interesting between a bias frame and a dark frame. The distinction that I like to make is that a dark frame, really, you're trying to measure this dark current, basically. But it gets a little bit confusing in a moment, and I'll explain where that confusion is. Notice, though, that the dark current that I put here, this accumulation of electrons, notice how small it is compared to the bias. This is another thing that I don't know that people pay attention to, but the bias levels on chips, when you download just a 0-second exposure, how many counts do you see? You might get many hundreds of counts, right? Could be 500 counts, could be 300 counts, could be 1,000 counts, some cameras. It depends from camera to camera, sensor to sensor, what you record for the bias level. But the dark current that accumulates through time, if your camera is accumulating 1 electron per second, and you do a 5-minute exposure, you might only have, well, it depends on the gain of your camera, right? But you might have only a few hundred electrons or something like that. So a few hundred counts, rather, or something like that. And that might be less than your bias. So the point is that the bias level is actually a larger thing generally than the dark current, which leads to this idea. These sensors that I'm talking about right now, this is the predictable bunch. This is the kind that it makes sense. And I'll show you the kind that doesn't make sense in a moment. But you have this very regular thing going on with the dark current. So if you look at the difference between a master bias and a master dark, and these are two 10-minute exposures, if you're zoomed out, it's really hard to see the difference. That only goes to show how small that dark current is compared to the bias level. And of course, when you integrate them together, what's happening in WBPP, now I'm telling you what you would be doing in manually in WBPP, when you say create a master, all it's doing is doing the image integration. That's it. There's nothing else to do, of course, right? There's nothing else. But it does image integration, and you get this result. You have some dark current and some bias level in that master dark. If you zoom into the darks, though, you can see there is a difference with darks, which is that you get hot pixels.
Hot pixels.
You'll see on the right, there are more little blippy things than there are on the left. And that's because pixels, they may accumulate their own amount of electrons. And these pixels are doing exactly the same thing, but there's a small population of pixels that don't. They gather these electrons at a nonlinear or nonlinear sense. And that leads them to show up in a picture like this, where you can see them quite clearly. Now, they will subtract out. So for the same exposure time, you can subtract this directly from another light frame with the same exposure time, and those hot pixels should subtract out. So you can't see the dark current here, but the dark current that's not just these hot pixels here. If you were to do some image statistics, you would be able to tell the difference between these two frames. But visually, really the only clue is the hot pixels. And I would also add the following, which is another topic. But hot pixels are not noise, not like a random noise, and they're also not a characteristic of the quality of a dark frame. Sometimes people have darks, and they you want to subtract them from data, but they might be old darks, so they don't characterize the hot pixels as well. They can still characterize the dark current just fine. So a dark frame, if it's characterizing a dark current, even if it's an older one, can still be good, but it may not subtract all the hot pixels. That doesn't make it a bad dark frame, actually, because if you use cosmetic correction or if you have dithered data, it's still going to be okay. But that's a point for another time. It's just that a lot of people get hung up with the fact they see some hot pixels and they go, oh my God, I got to take new darks every time I see a hot pixel. It's not quite that way. Master flats, as I just described, are going to be calibrated. You can do this with a nice sensor. You can calibrate them with a master bias if it's a short exposure. And then all you're left with is the light, which you can then integrate together to form that master flat. And what I just explained to you was that if you did this manually, you're now in charge of setting up image integration. You're in charge of doing this correctly.
Right.
There's a couple of steps you need to do. And why you do them, I bet you most people don't know and couldn't remember unless they look back at those steps that are written down. They go, okay, have I done, what's on here on the screen, right? Okay, so WBPP, well, it's not even, okay, you can record it in icon set, but that isn't really the most important thing, to be honest. The more important thing is this stuff, the higher level stuff of what we're doing here. And WBPP communicates that to you, whereas the manual does not. And that's the argument I'm trying to make here.
Sure.
I would just add that when you are working with flats that might be long enough, some people, for example, they have narrowband imagery, right? Where you're doing images through hydrogen alpha, sulfur, whatever filters. You might not be able to get a nicely exposed, depending upon how you're doing it, image unless you expose for 30 or a minute, 30 seconds or a minute or whatever it is. That's fine. There's no harm done. But in that amount of time, you may gather a little bit of that dark current in a significant way. See, if you have a short enough exposure, now I wrote 30 seconds here, it may not be, 30 is just an arbitrary number. So you'll need to know for your own sensor what it is. But for very short exposures, you don't need to worry about it because it's just not significant. In fact, it can even add problems if you don't do it this way. But for a longer exposure, you can always just subtract. You can do the following. You can always subtract a dark frame to calibrate either a flat or a light with an exactly matching time. So when you're doing this for flats, you call it a dark frame because that's all it is. Now, people have this thing, and it developed out of actually a checkbox that became available in WBPP, as if it's a special thing, a flat dark, right? A flat dark is just a dark frame that you're using to calibrate a flat. That's all that is, right? So it's just a dark frame. It goes into the dark frame panel, and when we go back to WBPP, I'll show you that. That's where it goes. So it doesn't go anywhere special. It is a dark frame that happens to be used to calibrate a flat field image. It could be calibrating anything else, but it's just a dark frame. So the reason why this is useful is because of the following. Some cameras have sensors which have variable or nonlinear electronic signatures. And so I'm going to move forward here and show you what I mean. So this is the normal calibration process. I basically now described it, where you subtract from this image. If you had a light frame, you would be subtracting a matching dark, and what you're doing is you're removing the dark current of the master bias basically at the same time, and you're left with the light. And then, of course, you want to calibrate that with your master flat, and you end up with an ultimately calibrated light frame image. That's it. That's the whole process. I will not show you this slide yet, but if you want, I will get back to it. It's a really cool slide. Here's where the problem is. This is the flat dark problem. Some sensors have nonlinear electronic signatures, and amp glow this is an example. There is not a supernova that you just missed outside the field. Instead, this is just an electronic signature of this chip. And the funny thing is that if you do a 1 second exposure, and then you do a 5 second exposure, it isn't necessarily a linear relationship with that amp glow. Not necessarily. It won't subtract out properly. And it's not just amp glows. There are actually some CMOS sensors that have just a different response. They even have different modes sometimes if you take really short exposures compared to longer exposures. So to mitigate, to remove all of these problems, if you always match your dark frames with your data frames, be it a flat or a light frame, you can't go wrong because you are doing an exact match. It's the best you can possibly do. Where you could go wrong is if you do the following. If you have one of those cameras that I just discussed, and you tried to do the thing that I showed earlier by using a bias to calibrate, for example, the flat, see, this won't work for that other frame, for that other sensor type. So let me show you why it doesn't work. It doesn't work because of this following reason. This is what I'll call the non-predictable or the variable sensors on the right. And you can see that I've got that little amp glow going on there. That's signaling that we can't distinguish when we subtract off the bias. We still have left an electronic signature plus some dark current. The dark current's there for these sensors too. But we can't distinguish between them. We have them both together. And so I've left that kind of dark current here inside, meaning that there's no way to know how much of it there is. So we can't calibrate it with a bias because we don't know what's left over, how much of that is electronic signature, between the dark current and this other stuff, amp glow or whatever it is.
So let me ask this then.
That's the fundamental problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask this. Now you have you do have on the market now newer sensors that are being advertised, and I actually have one that do not have the amp glow issue.
Right.
Then if you have those newer sensors, like for example, the DWO ASI 533 has no amp glow. So would then you then go to the bias frame model?
Here's what I would say. So this is part of the point that I'm making. The answer is you don't know. The answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't trust anything manufacturers tell me when it comes to a sensor. I trust it once I've made the measurement myself. So the answer is that if I'm a beginner user, I would still do flat darks until I know enough to be able to tell. I shouldn't have said flat darks. I still subtract darks from my flats to calibrate them until I know enough to tell that there's something wrong when I just do, maybe I try out the bias method, which is what you're saying. It will be obvious that it doesn't work. It doesn't calibrate the data correctly. You'll know that it's not doing it. So you can do no harm if you always match your darks with your flats and darks with your lights. No harm there at all, right? But you are correct that it very well could be that you have this sensor that's well behaved because the amp glow is not a problem. Now, I argue that there still are sensors, even without amp glow, that may still have some other variable electronic signature that I don't know what it is, that you got to watch out for. So I don't want to assume that, but you are correct. Absolutely. If you have one of these well-behaved sensors, if it is well-behaved, then absolutely. No amp glow, no other electronic weirdness. Sure, you can use a bias to calibrate all of your flats that are of any short exposure time, whether it be 1 second, 3 seconds, 5 seconds. There are two benefits of using a bias. This is the first benefit, is you can use a bias frame to calibrate flat frames of all different exposures, and then you don't have to take a whole bunch of flat darks for each one of those things. While that could be the safest thing to do, it's totally unnecessary if you have one of these sensors that's well behaved. The other use of a dark frame that calibrates, the other use of a bias frame, not just calibrating a flat, the other use of a bias frame is to do something called dark frame optimization, which is a whole nother topic. I'm happy to explain that, and I would love to do it because it's really cool. But this was the fundamental problem, and so this is why you end up having to match with these kind of variable electronic signature sensors, why you end up wanting to match your darks with your flats and your darks with your lights, and you cannot optimize. So all the benefits of biases are removed when you have one of these sensors that are of this type. And so that's the sad thing. You can take advantage of the bias when you have a nice one. You don't do any harm. If you have a nice sensor, you don't do any harm by matching. That's why I recommend it for people who are just starting. There's no harm, but you won't be as efficient as you possibly could if you actually have one of these nice sensors. But there's never harm in doing it. That's why that recommendation you'll always see is just using matching darks. That's right. That can't do any harm. But if you have a nice sensor, you're missing out on some of the cool benefits of what a bias frame can do. The two benefits as I've described. So
as you talked about, yes.
Exactly.
Nice.
So now
that's interesting. That's really good.
I'm going to stop sharing for, let's see. No, I won't stop sharing. I'll just exit out of here and go back into here. So I will exit here because I don't want confusion here. I'll just remove that. We only want to be looking here for a moment.
Okay.
Here we are, coming back. So now you can appreciate some of what I was saying. This particular person's sensor is, let's say it's well-behaved. So as a well-behaved sensor, I don't have a dark frame to calibrate this flat field image. I just don't have it. But I do have a bias, so I'm done. Everything's good. We're all happy here. So that works there, and then this calibrates with the dark and the flat, so that because that matches this dark here. So we're all good. And again, this tells me, exactly what's going on with each of these frames. When I look at my cool little diagram here, it tells me what's going on, and I can see why it's going on.
Got you. Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome stuff.
This is,
So, I mean, there's much more to explain about the mechanics of doing things. Like in this particular data set, these are one-shot color camera images. So I need to tell WBPP, hey, this is a color image, and that's why you see the cool little rainbow symbol there. So I need that to be here, and I need to make sure that that's correct. Because if you don't do that, if you have one that's color and one that's not color, it gets a little funky here, right? Because how could you calibrate this with that? There's no that's not a fun thing to do, right? Do you see how the flat is not lit up here?
Disappeared. Yeah.
It disappeared. Yeah.
Because we're not actually matching this. So basically, we're just not going to flat field this image. And that's why there's no flat showing up here. So again, it's communicating to us. Now, you have to know the fundamental thing of, you need to subtract stuff and you need to divide, which is what the flat is doing. But that information is here to be told to you, to be expressed to you. Exactly. Now, watch this. Okay, so right now, this is not being calibrated. Now, it doesn't say, it's not telling you, I can see here that it's not being calibrated. I can see here that it's not being calibrated. But WBPP does not say, thou shall not do this. You can not calibrate your light frame if you don't want to. That's fine. You can. It's not a showstopper in the sense that it is possible to do this. Now, what if I did the following? What if I say, okay, here I am with my light, and I'm going to try to force it to calibrate on this image here. I can do that. Instead of using auto, this auto means try to match everything. This is what that logic is. And so it's not finding a match, so it's not doing it. But if I force it here, now I'm trying to do something. Now I'm really trying to do something wrong, right? Because now I'm saying, I am forcing you, use that black and white image to calibrate my color thing. And now now it's actually telling me you really are doing something dumb here. So again, it's communicating something that you would not see if you were manually doing this process.
That's absolutely
right. I see WBPP as a is a new way, and a very influential way, for people to learn the pre-processing steps to be able to use it in a variable way, in a configurable way, in a way that, you know, with a different camera or different kinds of data, you can really take advantage of, and do it in a way with much more confidence, because it's telling you this information.
Okay.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's a
Yes,
big
it does.
jump
It
from
absolutely,
their
absolutely it
WBPP
does.
I'm gonna get-
1.0.
I'm going to get that off the screen because that's a bad thing to do. And so do you have it, does the example that we talked about, though, your example was, tell me again what your example was, because I'll just load that configuration, Eric. Your example was a CMOS sensor.
Yes, it's a CMOS sensor that.
Was it a good one or a bad one? We have the good CMOS, and we have the bad CMOS. It was a good one.
Yeah, it's a good CMOS. So you have a good CMOS sensor that you don't have amp glow. You know, there's no amp glow. You're hunky dory.
Okay. Hang on.
So let's go that route first.
Okay. Let me find. Hang on. Normally I have this all set here. So WBPP is under my PixInsight. No, not this one. It's video recordings. Hold on. That is here. Yeah, see, everyone can learn my where everything is.
About
now we have
file structure.
Yeah, no, you don't.
Exactly.
You definitely don't want to know this. This is insanity. Okay. So I think that this is of that type. So this gentleman has, he has darks, flat darks. Okay, so this one does not have the biases. So the biases are, well, I understand what you're saying. Okay, the example that you want, it doesn't matter if it's a CMOS or a regular CCD,
matter.
right? There's
Exactly.
no difference.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter. So
but,
if you want that example, then I would just load this. So here I have, let me click here. I think I may have put everything in the same, see, I have all the flats and darks. I think I have everything in the same directory here. Hold on. Let me see. Those are darks, those are biases, these are flats. Now I probably have more than what is necessary. Oh, so I should just be able to do the whole directory, right? And I got all my lights. I think so. I threw this in one directory so I could do exactly this, I think. Let's see.
Okay.
It takes it a minute to load it all.
Yeah.
So let's see. I got biases here.
There's a lot of auto sorting. I love even before, you know, the new version, just with batch processing and everything, just you can just add files and if you have the correct information, if your files have the correct data, it can sort it right there for you. You can take everything out of one folder and it'll dump it in there. It's awesome.
And if it does not have the correct information, or, you know, depending upon the setup of the acquisition software, some people, they don't set it up optimally. And so it, for example, one of the big problems, and again, this harkens back to language, is that people who are just getting into PixInsight, they hear the word flat dark. It's just a dark frame, but they hear the word flat dark, and so they think it has something to do with the flat. So they take them as if they label them as flat field images.
Yes.
And then when you use the add files button, it goes into the flats directory, and then people go, why isn't it? Yep. Or maybe they don't even know it's, and it gets very confusing. So
it does, yes.
Flat darks are just dark frames. They're just dark frames that happen to calibrate flats. So here we are. I have lots of unnecessary stuff, but that makes it look cool because you can see it's matching. So I have 600-second exposures, 90-second exposures, 60-second exposures, and other things here. Let's see. Here are all the lights. These are all just 10-minute exposures. So we look in the control panel, you can see lots of stuff needs to be taken care of here.
Yeah.
You got to decide some things. I always like to take care of the flats first. I think that's a good place to start. So you click in the panel here, and it's telling me that this flat frame's exposure differs from the master dark's exposure by more than 5 seconds. That is very true, because this is a 16-second exposure, right? But look,
Yes.
just so you see it, look at the green. This is 19 seconds. Look at this is 13 seconds, right? And this crazy thing here is 120 seconds, which I'm not using, but it's okay. They're all different times.
Yes.
If I had one of those misbehaving, I don't want to call it misbehaving, variable sensors, then I'd have to create flat darks for each of these up here. I need to match them exactly. But this is what you wanted, was you have the well-behaved sensor. So we get to do the following. We get to calibrate all of these with the bias, as long as we're not trying to match a dark. We don't need to match a dark. There's no matching dark to be found, which is what this warning says. So we turn this off.
Turn it off.
And we turn this off.
Okay.
And we turn this off. And we can see it's correct because it's getting lit up. We can see it's correct because we can look in the calibration flow diagram. We can see that everything's right. We have little check marks here. It means that we're not doing something that is just crazy. It doesn't mean that we're doing the right thing, but it means that we're not doing something really wrong. And this Z is not in play, so it doesn't matter. But here, just for prettiness sake, I'll do that.
You'll uncheck it, yeah.
And yeah, because I only have blue, green, and red exposures. I don't have a Z exposure. That's a scientific filter is what that is. So here we have matching darks. So our work is done, right? We are matching and we have matching flats, because the blue matches the blue, the green matches the green, the red matches the red, right?
Exactly.
And so everyone is happy and everyone can go home happy. That's how you would do it here. The other gentleman's data that I was about to load, it's the example where you have the flat darks. Although I assume that, do you mind if I load that up real quick? Do we have some time?
No, please, go ahead. No, we got time. Go ahead.
Okay, 1 second. Let me do a clear here. Reset.
And you would do, and this is basically the same process as you're doing this with RGB, but if you're doing this in narrowband, when you're using sulfur, hydrogen, and oxygen, it would basically be the same process. So it is the same process.
Yep, it is the same process. There is going to be a little feature that'll be showing up in WBPP shortly. There is an issue with some sensors where when you subtract your dark, the amount of signal is so low in some of these narrowband images that if you don't add a pedestal to it, some extra little number, you can end up with negative numbers, which you don't want, and because then it gets interpreted by PixInsight as a 0, and you don't want that. So showing up will be the pedestal that was removed, and that's coming back. It's really only for people who have that problem, but so that'll be coming back. So here we go. Let me get PixInsight fundamentals. This is part of my course stuff, but I've made this stuff available for free to everyone on the internet, for everyone to look at. So let's do this. So this guy gave darks. Well, let's just load them. Yeah. So let's load them. He's got his darks, and then he doesn't have any biases, right?
Right.
No.
So this guy has flat darks. And then he has, what else does he have? He's got his flats. Yep. And then he should have some light frame data as well, right? Now, the reason, we have light frames here, right? We have dark frames here. And then we have our flats here.
Yep.
But let's look closely at these flats. If we look closely, we have our flats. You see, he labeled them dark flats.
He labeled them dark flat, yeah.
But that's not why they're going there. It's because if we look at one of his images, it actually is of an image type that is a flat field image.
It's in the
we want this to be in the FITS header, and these should be dark frames, right?
Yes.
So these should not be here. Right, so I'm going to highlight them and remove. The only thing we should have here are flats. They should have shown up here, right? Well, how do we actually get them to show here? The reason that didn't happen is because we used add files. But if the only problem is image type, which is the only problem in this case, we can just force it by saying add darks. And then when we come over here to his flat darks here, now we'll force them to show up in here where they should be.
Yeah. Now let
me make this explicit. Let me just, because I think this is worth the extra 5 seconds to do. I may have to navigate to this place. Let me see. Is it showing up here yet? No. I got to navigate. I don't like navigating. So that's here, 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 fix here, here, and here. And this guy's stuff was here. Here, I'll make sure I show it. There it is. But we go to here. If you look at image type, it says it's a flat, and it's supposed to be a dark. That's the problem. So this is why I tell people, especially people who are just getting started in, processing images and using PixInsight and using WBPP, the very first thing I tell them is, in the beginning, use these buttons. Because if you do so, if there happens to be some confusing error in the image type, you get around that. You're going to force that not to be true because you're using your brain. You're saying, well, these are my darks because I know that these are supposed to be dark frames, right? He would have known that those are supposed to be dark frames even though it got labeled wrong. So this is the kind of stuff that I tell people in my fast track training. This is an example of the philosophy that I'm using. I want to make sure that people, no matter what data they have of their own, can follow those steps, and with some very large percentage, I can't say 100%, but some very large percentage of the time, they're going to succeed. So that is also some of the thought that I gave in fast track training, is to make sure not only do they get to see the relationship between the data and how it interacts with the processing, but also I try to choose the path that gives you the most likely opportunity for success. Pressing the add files button does not do that, because there's a number of ways, if files are not properly annotated in the FITS headers, that you'll run into problems like I just demonstrated.
Right.
So now that we have it set up properly, if we go to the control panel, we'll see there are no biases because this is one of these variable type sensors. And it means then that we have two kinds of darks. Now, he doesn't have multiple flat darks because he's using one of these, this is a one-shot color camera sensor. So there aren't multiple filters here, but we would need to tell it, hey, we're going to be matching here. And this time the matching is correct because we are using a dark, and with that matches here, and this matches there, and this also matches here, assuming that we tell it all the appropriate things like this. And like this, now we're ready to rock and roll.
Now let me ask this: would you be you could also, or can you not also, in doing it, you went through the add darks method to add those to say, okay, I know what these are, and I'm going to designate, yes, these are darks. But can you also use the add custom button?
You can, but
do it that way?
The reason. You could, but add custom fixes the other elements of the image, right? So that's why I said in the beginning, if the only problem is the image type, just using these buttons will get around that. Now, if you also have this problem of, well, not even the filter is correct, or not even the binning is correct, somehow that got written wrongly into the FITS header. Yeah. So add custom is the most flexible, because now you get to specify all the characteristics of the image, the image type, the filter, the binning, and the exposure time. Whereas here, all you're fixing is the image type. That's all you're doing here. Because you're just saying, this is the image type. No matter what you see in the FITS header, this is the image type. That's especially useful for people who use their one-shot, they use just a digital camera. where there's no header information to specify what kind of frame is what, if it's a flat or a dark. So that's, that's the real reason I think these buttons became there, but it's also a good way to have a path that people can follow where they're less likely to run into a problem, at least initially. Once they understand, well, this means image type. So if I see a problem when I use add files, which is certainly faster, I know what the problem is. Why they're not showing up in the correct panel here is because the image type is wrong in the FITS header. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, Eric, one of the things, if you remember a couple of months ago when I was doing when I was cleaning out my filters with that custom button. Remember when I was cleaning out my filters and the S2 was in the O3 slot?
That's why I brought it. That's why I kind of brought it up.
So when you have a brain fart like that, then you can switch that in the custom header and make your S2 O3 and the O3 S2 like it's supposed to be. So
exactly. That's why I brought it up.
There you go.
So now let me think about this. I do have to think. I'll show you one more. You know what? Let me pause before I do anything else. Do you have any questions about anything so far? Was what I've shown all making sense?
It is absolutely making sense to me now.
Yeah.
And understanding why it's, how this works and why you're doing it this way. And it is definitely, for me, going through these steps is definitely showing me how this is also can be utilized as a teaching and a learning tool. So I do appreciate that. And so that is absolutely awesome. I'm taking a look here.
If everybody doesn't know this, I mean, I know Adam has mentioned it a couple times already. This is a lot of this, or most of this, is all explained in this definitive guide for WBPP.
Yeah, and I do it much better there, right?
and you know what? And if you haven't gone on his website and taken a look at some of the fundamental packages that Eric and I are both members of. He actually goes into a deeper dive and some other stuff as well. So you might want to check that out as well, because that's some really awesome stuff in there, Adam.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I didn't want to. I'm not trying to make this a commercial. I mentioned Fast Track because it really is relevant to the idea of processing and learning at the same time, and I like that. That's why I'm highlighting WBPP tonight, because I like that, and so it really speaks to this Fast Track thing. But as far as what I do have, that's true. I have a whole collection of stuff under fundamentals, just hundreds of hours of videos. What you're seeing here are only the top level. There are more videos underneath of each of these things, which has more stuff, right? Not only is it explanatory, but I also have worked examples with data included, so you can follow along with the same data. But on top of all of that, you also get PixInsight TV, which is that I will regularly have available sessions that just highlight things. In fact, I had a session where I was very fortunate to get a hold of Roberto to come on and talk about the new WBPP. And so we had a great session on the last PixInsight TV, but we're making episodes, or I'm making episodes now. I only have 3, but I'll be doing more going forward. And they're always available. So people that are not currently members of my site, for $15, you can check out. Well, the last one was free. So if you want to get an opportunity, you can just check out the one on WBPP. But the other 2, it's $15. But that's included with fundamentals, as is this new thing that I'm talking about, Fast Track, also included. But Fast Track stands on its own. So for some people who they don't know, they don't know what you know. You know what I'm doing in fundamentals. You know the amount of effort that I put into creating these tutorials. But people don't know, and if I were to prove it to everyone by making them available to the world, I'd say, see here, look, you can see what I did, but then I can't, I need to be able to be compensated at some level for this work. So Fast Track, I think, Fast Track for people who are getting initiated into it, I think is a really good way to do it. So it's $60 for this training that you can do in a relatively short period of time. And then if you wanted to go forward with fundamentals, which is kind of the main thing, then you apply the $60 towards the price of fundamentals. So you're really not, it's like you're getting fundamentals yeah, incrementally rather than the full thing. So you're not out. If you didn't like it for some reason, you didn't want to continue, then it's only $60. But of course, I have found that the response to Fast Track has been very, very good. So
now I have not had an opportunity to go into Fast Track, but I definitely will. But going through Fast Track, does it focus now? This is just me asking. Does it look more upon one-shot color, or does it do both mono and one-shot color, or using both types of data?
So what I did is I picked. No, yeah, and here's the answer. What I did is I picked one data set because I have to give. This is for someone. You got to remember, this is really for people who are just getting started. They tell me that I've only been doing astrophotography for the past 3 months, right? Or whatever it is. They're just getting started and PixInsight coming from Photoshop or something, and they want to learn how to do this stuff. So I picked one data set, and that data, if you click here, you can see data courtesy of this nice gentleman. You download that data. So now you have exactly what I do. And what happens is, in an episode, I demonstrate things, I explain some stuff, and then I give people the chance, now you have to do this, and then we're going to go talk about what it is that you did, right? So I actually have a lesson in the sense that, I show frames, and here are all the flats, and I want you, I'm not going to tell you the answer now. Why don't you go through them? You go through the bias frames, go through the flats, go through the dark frames. Tell me what you see. I just demonstrated how to measure these images with a little readout tool. You can see the values. Now you go through the frames and you tell me what you find, right? And then you come over here to the discussion, whatever. Did you see what I see? And then I show all the things that I see that are relevant in those frames. And if people, saw them, they're going to be very excited that they saw the same things I picked up. If they didn't see them, then they can really appreciate what to look for. That's rarely taught. If you just show the steps, you're not showing what to look for. So I'm showing a one-shot color camera example, but it is really not about, whether it's color or monochrome or how to set that up. That's actually somewhat irrelevant. This is really about defining a workflow, regardless of the data type, that you can appreciate from the beginning. And that variation of using monochrome or having a sensor that's not, that's variable or not variable, that variation is going to be easy to understand once you go through this. And in fact, of course, I do explain it because the very first thing I do here is I link to my WBPP videos. You're going to get to learn that as part of Fast Track because I just kind of include it. So I'm pointing people to it here as well. So that introduction is part of it. All that information that I do in the guide is all part of it, but I don't do every configuration in Fast Track. I pick one and I say, here's the data we're going to work with. You're going to go through it with me, and we're going to see what's in the data, and you're going to come up with a final result just like I do without a whole lot of problems.
Nice.
Good.
This is awesome stuff.
Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. I'm like doing the infinity screen or something. That's crazy. So tell me about time. When do you guys usually wrap up here?
Up until last week, we've taken as long as 3 hours. Last week, I had them on a timer. They were out in an hour.
Yeah. We're kind of cutting it back. We kind of like to cut it back. An hour and a half, an hour and 45 now.
Yeah, an hour and a half. So would you guys be interested in the idea of optimization?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. So from what I've described so far, here's a takeaway. Optimization, and I'll show you this in just a moment, of dark frames is something that you can do only with cameras not of this kind, right? You can only do this with the sensors that are the well-behaved ones, the ones where you can take advantage of the bias. It's the bias, the subtraction of the bias, that allows you to do this cool trick. But that trick comes with some consequences. The idea of doing this thing is neat, but it also requires an extra level of attentiveness You can't, well, you can, but I would recommend don't use it until you know what to look for to know whether you're getting a better answer or not, or whether it's not doing any harm, because it can do harm if it's not done properly or configured properly. So it is a cool trick, very cool thing to do. So let me show you the other way that things go. Let's see, where's my cool diagram? Here it is. And I'm going to both, right now, what I'm going to do is explain how it works. But I made a video, one video in this guide on YouTube that explains all the things to understand about the consequences of using the optimization thing. And I'll hint at some of them here as I go along, but I put it together obviously better in the video that I have online.
Okay.
So the idea is the following. Let's say you have your light frame, you took a picture of some galaxy, and your picture was 10 minutes long, or 5 minutes long. Let's keep it like a CMOS person, right? Because they have shorter exposure. So five minutes long, right?
Sure.
But you have on hand, you don't have any 5-minute darks. You don't have any 10-minute darks. You have one master 15-minute dark frame. You can use a cool trick called dark frame optimization, or scaling, basically. The dark frame optimization, I'll tell you why that's called that in a moment, to use that dark frame to properly calibrate the light frame, even though it's a shorter exposure time. That's really cool. And let me also say that technically, although I think this is a more advanced thing to do, because again, you want to make sure that it's actually doing something reasonable for you. But technically, even if you have exposures that are identical, they're both the same time, 5 minutes and 5 minutes, you can use dark frame optimization to potentially scale things in a way, scale what is basically, I'll show you in a moment, this dark current, in a way that may even improve, do slightly better than if you just simply did a subtraction of the dark that's of the same time. So let me explain now what happens here. There is this black box where there's this thing called optimization, and it was a checkbox in the WBPP, in that little calibration area. You can check that box to force this to happen. These won't match if these are two different times, right? If this is 300 seconds and this is 15 minutes, these aren't going to match. So what do? And you're not going to subtract just the bias, because you'll have dark current still left over. So you do this optimization bit, if you can. So the way the dark frame optimization works is the following. You start by taking your master dark and you subtract off the bias. And then you're left with just the dark current. You can't do this with one of those crazy sensors that has the amp glow, but you can with one of these well-behaved sensors. And a frame where you've subtracted off the bias and all you're left with is some counts that are there just because of that dark current, that is called a thermal frame. It has a name. It's a thermal frame because the electrons that are there because of the jostling, the thermal kinetic energy of the atoms in the chip, and that's what bumps up the electrons, which you see as this accumulation of electrons through time. That's why it's called a thermal frame. So you create this thermal frame, and then PixInsight does this cool thing. What it does is it subtracts that thermal frame from your light temporarily in memory and looks at the noise. And then it varies by multiplying times some scaling factor. It varies the amount of this, it divides by 2 or divides by 3 or whatever it needs to divide by, and it iteratively converges on the value, the K value, the optimization constant, that when you subtract from this light frame gives you the lowest noise, basically, that you're looking for. And that should be, in this case, if this is 15 minutes and this is a 5-minute exposure, that scaling factor should be 0.3. So then you can even look, see, this is how you begin to appreciate if it's working correctly. Well, then you look in the console, because when you use this in the console, it's going to tell you the scaling factor, the optimization factor was 0.3. Now, if it said 1, it didn't do anything. If it said 0.1, you get really concerned. You think, that's not right. That's probably not right. Why doesn't that, it should be something near 0.3. You would expect it to be near 0.3, right? To be 1/3 of 15 minutes for this 5-minute exposure. So that's how this thing works. So once it does the scaling, it pops out at the same size as this one is, so that it can be, then you subtract the bias first, as you normally would. Now you subtract the scaled dark current, the scaled thermal frame off, and then you're left again with your calibrated image, which you calibrate with your flat.
And you're good.
Yay. That's how you do it. Now, let me show you the danger. Are you ready for some danger? Here's the danger. Let me show you some danger. The danger is right here. Here's the danger. The danger is that what happens if you don't have, let's say you have a flat field image, right? And you don't have a matching dark frame, but you have a bias, okay?
Right.
So then people say, oh, well, I'll go ahead and I'll optimize because I have a, I don't know, whatever. They have like a 3-minute dark frame and they have their 0.1 second flat field image. So I'm going to optimize and I'm going to try to do this trick. I'm going to go look at the that master dark, which is going to be your 3-minute exposure. It's going to get some thermal frame off, just like I just showed. And then it's going to try to subtract that from the flat. But the flat doesn't have anything. The flat doesn't have any dark current, or it's such a small amount that optimization process is going to be converging on a number that is very close to, well, the noise answer is going to be close to don't do anything, which is a scaling factor of 1. But the optimization process, that convergence may not even converge. That's why you'll see, it used to be that the console would tell you no convergence with the, if you try to optimize, no convergence with this dark frame optimization thing. It's not I think the word was correlated. There's no correlation between the dark frame and the flat. So it can't calibrate it and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, right? But even worse is where you do have, it does reach an answer and it over subtracts a little bit. So instead of it not subtracting anything and the scaling factor is 1, it still subtracts a little bit from the flat, even though we didn't want it to. And that causes flats not to work. Whenever you have some additive value left over in a flat, either because you added too much or you didn't, or you subtracted too much, in either case, if you bite into the flat signal or add to it, that instantly screws up flats working. And I actually demonstrate that in that optimization video. I do an example with just subtracting the bias, and then I do the second example. I don't change anything. All I do is I say, well, let's optimize with this dark frame, and it doesn't work. And the flats don't calibrate all those dust donuts. And this is the thing that this is the thing that happened to people all the time, is they said they set it up correctly. They configured it. They used dark frame optimization. It should do this magic of doing what I just described right here, right? But for flats, that dark current, that thermal frame is so small, it doesn't necessarily work. So one of the things that I recommend is don't try to use dark frame optimization for flats in general. It would be better to subtract a bias or getting matching dark instead of matching dark instead of turning to optimization. Another way of saying that is that I think dark frame optimization works best when you have significant dark currents, that is a significant thermal frame to work with, and a real dark current in the other frame to work with. So when you have significant amounts of dark current in both frames, then you're in a good place. Then this optimization, I think, does a really nice job. Even if you had matching light and dark, if you have significant amounts in both, if you know what to look for, there's a potential you could maybe even do something better, which is what is shown on the PixInsight website. He actually shows an example of matching time, but the temperature varied. That's the reason why, by the way. If you have matching times, but if the temperature varies, or maybe you don't have a controlled sensor, dark optimization can be helpful. It really can.
So let me ask this then. No, regardless of the sensor, should, new people or just in general, not even just new people who are getting into PixInsight and getting into astrophotography and learning the processes and learning processing, should we start maybe looking more and getting to the habit of matching our flat frames and dark frames? Matching, getting used to matching those up, having the flat darks that match, what your flats are and things like that to try just to get in the habit of moving away from that, from needing the bias.
I'm not saying. What I am saying is the following: as someone who's just getting into it and does not yet know what to look for, yes, you should match. So when you're just getting into it, everyone should basically match, because that's the safest thing to do. It's the way that's going to give you the optimal result with the least way of messing it up. But I do not say the second part of your statement, which is that we should make that a habit. And then what you discover that your sensor is one of the good kind, the moment that you know that you have that good sensor, and you really can appreciate the fact that there is no harm in not matching for short exposures. No, absolutely, you should take advantage of the bias. There's no reason why you shouldn't just calibrate your flats with a bias. There is absolutely no harm. And just to remember the reason why there is no harm in my statement. Let's say you had, I'm going to show this diagram because I want to say this very clearly. So here is this diagram, right? I don't see my double. Oh, maybe I separated them? No, I didn't separate them. Hold on. There it is. Here.
Yeah.
Here's the reason why it works. If you have the sensor that is variable, you're going to match every time. You need to match your flats. You need to match your darks. If you happen to have the predictable sensor and you're matching every time, what that means is you're going to be taking a 5-second exposure, and what you're going to do is you're going to put it in the darks column, right? Because you're going to think of it as a dark frame. That's fine. There's no harm in doing that. Mathematically, it's the same as if we put it in the bias column, but the inverse is not true. If we took a frame that we thought was, that had significant dark current or something, you can't put that in the bias column and use it as a bias, right? Nor would you want to do the other thing, which is if you have a variable sensor, you don't want to necessarily use a bias, because you won't be able to scale it properly, subtract it properly, all that kind of stuff. So that's where the harm is. The harm is if you don't know that you have that camera, if you don't know it yet, you can't take advantage of the bias. You just have to know you have that kind of sensor. By the way, most sensors are the well-behaved ones, but there are a few sensors that are not, and they're kind of spoiling it for everyone, because for the number of those sensors that are out there, you have 1,000 people that are going, oh man, it doesn't work, and that's what you see everywhere online, are all these images where it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And it's just because of those sensors. But so you have to, at the moment, you have to kind of outline that. I would hope that in the future with CMOS sensors, it'll probably go in the direction of, becoming much more astronomy oriented, meaning that they won't have that variability in the electronic signature. And then they'll all more be ending up over here in this column on the left. And
Sure.
The good ones.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now,
so hopefully in the future.
So is it fair to say right now, because I'm looking at your example here, is it fair to say, and Dan, you have, an SBIG, that
Yep.
the CCDs would
Sure.
most likely be the ones that would fall under the predictable, no matter
Yes.
just because of those types of
Yeah.
the sensors.
Now there are
those
CCDs. It's true. There are CCDs and it'll be obvious to you. There are some CCDs that do have an amp glow, which is nonlinear, and it doesn't subtract. Sometimes you'll find that, and I've had this in the past with an SBIG camera, that SBIG camera, that in the corner, you get this amp glow, and you can adjust some kind of potentiometer, and it goes away, and you can, something you can adjust, and it fixes it. But so CCD cameras can have variable sources of electronic stuff going on. It's not only CMOS detectors, but in general, yeah, I think that's a very true statement. Most CCD cameras are going to be of that type, very stable and predictable. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been actually able to since I learned about optimization of darks from one of Adam's videos, I've been using the optimization pretty much standardly with even the original WBPP 1.0. And I've had some really, really, really good results with it, and I'll continue to use it until either I break it or it gets broken. But I've been taking 900-second darks and using them for most of my images and just updating them. I update them, I guess, just from a OCD point of view. I update them probably like every 3 or 4 months, on a cloudy day sometime.
Sure.
And the optimization seems to work great for me. And as Adam mentioned, there is, if there is no correlation, you'll be able to see it pop up right through the Process Explorer, and you'll see it bounce by, and it'll tell you that there's no correlation as well when it's trying to get through the process. So,
gotcha. So I can see the advantage of, well, I see the advantage in this way, just as you mentioned, to do optimization. If you do have one of these predictable good sensors, you're saving, you're saving space on your computer, on your hard drive, so you don't have to necessarily have a large dark library, with different exposure times and things like that. You can definitely perhaps just use one exposure time, maybe like in your example, you're saying 900 seconds, and then using dark optimization and just using those and having that master bias, it would help. That definitely would save, that's one small advantage of that, because you can understand that, especially in my case, taking dark flats, I have to have pretty much an entire library of different exposures to fall under that. And that takes up a lot of, drive storage space, for that.
Yeah, but
so
you're an IT guy. You're just going to buy another hard drive and throw it in there.
I'm just going to buy another hard drive. Sure. But for other people, that's a good reason why that's helpful.
Let me say something about the space. It's interesting. You're talking about the space saving. A lot of people, they throw away their data.
No.
If space is really cheap, I would say keep the files. There was this thing going on that I've been really trying to be a leader on, which is trying to figure out another problem that people have been having with they use drizzle integration, and they end up with little black spots in the center of their stars. So we had today a resolution, because we finally convinced Juan to, I've really been pushing hard on this. Juan finally responded. Maybe that's the benefit of being a PixInsight ambassador, right? He responded and finally gave the answer of what the issue is. And so now, and anyone has this issue, we can point at, well, here's the problem, and here's what you need to do. That's just great. But this has been an issue for people for a while. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but I was just saying that some people, I was asking for data, and they didn't have it. They had the picture that showed the problem, but they threw out all the they threw out all the calibration data. They threw out everything that went into making the picture. And for me,
Yeah.
I say, don't, calibration data, especially, that's the lifeblood, because that's the only thing that makes everything that follows work, especially the calibration data. I just loaded moments ago calibration data that I took from back in 2000, what is this, 12, I think. So 9 years ago. I still have the data that are going to calibrate the raw data that I also keep, so that I can always go back and if something I need to, I can. So
yeah, and that's
if you don't mind,
you make sure you do. And I mean, storage is cheap, so hold on to
yeah,
those
cheap enough
calibrations.
today.
Hold on to those calibration
Storage has outgrown the size of the chips, because
Absolutely.
maybe it used to be that the chips were so so much memory was taken up just with all those exposures. Although with my Canon camera, wow, again it's the cameras are catching up with their gazillion pixels. Let me show you this as a final example, because it just highlights everything. And one additional thing that I haven't mentioned, but it is actually one of the coolest things. I will leave most of that to my video. So again, go on YouTube and see that WBPP definitive set of videos, which again highlight all of this. I'm not done, by the way. WBPP was just released, so there's still some more videos to come. But what's there now is I think is pretty rock solid. So here is a data set where I have lots of cool things, where I've got red, green, blue, hydrogen alpha clear data, right? And you'll see that as far as matching is concerned, there are some issues. So first thing you want to do is we can start with the flats. But one of the cool things here is that I'm using master flats. So there's no calibration necessary. They're already calibrated, right? There's no extra thing going on there. So that's cool. But you'll notice that my light frames, this is an 1800 second hydrogen alpha. So you can see it's matching the hydrogen alpha. That's good for the flat. And it's matching a dark, which is good here. Oh, sorry, a flat. It's matching the dark here, which is good. I'm not optimizing, but there is a bias there as well. See, I'm not optimizing. And so it has a check mark. It has a check mark because everything's good. There's no problem. But all the other frames do have an issue, because there's this warning. They're not matching. 900 seconds does not match the 1800 seconds. And this is unbinned. Why I have two here. One is binned and one is not binned. You'll notice my data is binned 2 by 2, right? So the binning matches, but the time doesn't. It's the time thing again. So this is when I was doing these public programs, where I had this astrophotography programming. And I couldn't take darks for all the different exposure times all the time. It's impossible to keep up with. So I would do this trick, because I had the sensor that allowed me to do this, of dark frame optimization. And I knew I was going to get more hot pixels, which is another consequence of dark frame optimization. The hot pixels do not calibrate out, which means you need other data, which means you need to appreciate that doesn't mean it's a bad frame. It just means you're using dark frame optimization. That's all. So I have to use dark frame optimization here. So I would optimize these things like this. And then you'll see I get these nice little check boxes, check marks.
Yep.
And that little function, that symbol, now you know what the function means. Why is that a function symbol? It's a function symbol because it actually has to do this little algorithm to determine the scaling factor, which I showed you in the slide.
Right. Yep.
And this actually is all I need to do. This sets up this data. Everything is now matched. But there's something else about this data. I'm going to exit and show it to you, how crazy this data set is. I'm going to go here. Oh, I have to navigate. Join me on a journey through space and time. Hold on. This is, correct. So this is 2012 or 14? 12.
They said 12.
Yeah, I did. And I just don't believe myself. So
that's all right.
Said, there it is. So you'll notice here that I have frames. Do you see how it says October 13th here?
Yeah.
That's visible to you? And then I have more
Yes.
frames here that are October 15th. And then
Yep.
more here that are October
17th.
17th. And then
Yes.
I have probably
19, 20, yeah, a
something
bunch of days.
from November 3rd, right? And
Yeah.
some of these are of the same kind, where I might have clears that were taken across 2 different nights or more, 3 or more nights, right? Same thing is true for the color data. So what I have set up in WBPP right now, it's going to, and let me show you this. Before I get out of here, though, notice that there is a word that is before the date. The word is I chose session. And then there's this date value, which is just a string of more numbers or letters, right?
Yeah.
So this first thing is called a keyword. And the second part is called the value of the keyword. So the keyword is the same everywhere, but the value is the thing that changes. And there's different ways of doing this. Because this was 9 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever, I put it in the file names because that's the way that I was acquiring the data at the time. Today, you can even do it in a better way where you don't have to name, as I've done here, the keywords and values in the files. You can put them in the folder names, which is really cool. But it's the same idea. So I've shown you that, but that now leads me to be able to do the following really cool trick. This is like a little bit of a magic trick. So this is called a custom grouping. We're always grouping. Whenever we look at these groups here, we're actually grouping by something. We're grouping by filter type, or we might be grouping by filter type and by binning type, right? So we're always grouping, but then we can add custom grouping. So right now, these are not being grouped in the sense that, see all these flats here? These are all masters, but it's only picking one of them. And this one master here is not appropriate for all of those files taken on the different nights. And by the way, I can tell you why that is, because the camera comes on and off the telescope every single night at the observatory that I was working with. That's why every night I had to have flats. So they have to match. Every night's data has to be matched with that same night's flats, or it doesn't work at all. Not even kind of, it just doesn't work. So, but this isn't matching right now because it's just picking one of them, one of the many. So in order for me to get it to, and that's true here, all the data would somehow be all together here. So we have all kinds of dates that are all together for all of these clear files, for all of the H alpha, for all the blues and everything. We have different dates for that same group. So we can break them up by specifying that key word, which was session. When we add it, this happens really fast, it's cool. It breaks up. Let me show it to you here. It's a little clearer because you have to scroll here. Let me show you here. It breaks up all of these filters into their component value. It's grouped now by value. So all the October 17ths are grouped here. Every frame that I did on October 18th is grouped here. Every frame that I did on October 19th is grouped here, and so on, right?
Right.
So now with this grouping in place, you can calibrate every flat. Every flat will now so you can see the master flats are grouped in the same way. So now each flat is going to match each light in the appropriate way. So we can properly do multi-night calibrations across multi-nights, calibrations across multi-anything. It's not just nights, but there are different kinds of multiple things you can imagine doing. If you were doing a, I don't know, a mosaic, maybe you had, it's like a multi-night, but you might be doing it across different panels or something because they were different in some way. Yeah. There's different ways you can now group things, but it's all customized. It's custom. And you can have more than one grouping, where if you wanted to do, these are like basically and statements, because what you're saying is it needs to match this and this and this. So if you add another grouping keyword, you'll be matching on yet dividing up this data into another thing. I don't know what it is, but you could match yet another thing if you wanted to. And it could be something in the fits header, right? So I'm showing a custom outside of the fits header, but we could just choose things that are in the FITS header. I explain all of this in my video, so please watch the video.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask.
There's a lot to this.
Yeah,
This
you know,
that is
all-
grouping keywords box.
I'm sure you're touching. You're most likely you're touching on those keyword boxes, and and using keywords. I'm assuming in the videos and how to use that properly. So
yeah, and if you and that's been a lot of the questions that we've been coming up against, and most of the questions have been coming up either from the control panel tab or the grouping keywords box. So,
Right.
And those are the two main things that have been updated with WBPP 2.0.
Yeah, and I'm not going to do this now, but because I've now regrouped them, my status here, this is, it's a little crazy. This would have been much easier if I had grouped these by folders. But because I did this by file names here, you remember how a moment ago I had to optimize to make all these, so I have to go through and optimize them all.
Yeah, that's what
it's still
Gotcha.
still worth it to it's still worth it to me, because this is going to do it across a ton of images, matching everything that needs to be matched, right?
Yeah.
I didn't do the H. No, I didn't do the H alpha. So anyway, once you get them all matched, then they're going to light up. So the red is going to match with the red, and then of course it's going to be calibrated through optimization of this dark frame. That's a longer exposure, and this shows everything that's, see, I've got the red here, so that's matching because we have a light frame that's red here, so that's good. We have the dark that's going to be, see the K shows up when there's a K here. That means that dark optimization is occurring. So this flow diagram is telling us everything that's unfolding, and it is everything that I want it to be. So it's really cool that you can do these multi-night examples, taking advantage of all of these elements.
Those, and honestly, the calibration diagram is awesome. To give you that visual indicator of just, of where, everything is, how everything's going to work, and how you're expecting it to work, and it gives you some sort of confirmation, looking at that, that diagram, to say, yeah, you're on the right path, you're getting things done correctly and things like that. So I kind of like that, where it gives you that diagram and that workflow, that flow to understand where everything is, and know what to expect when you're doing these, So I think that's pretty cool.
And now that you could properly do the multi-nights the way you want with the matching of the flats and the darks and the lights for each individual night, once you put your 400, 500 images in there, you could hit run, go to bed, and wake up the next morning and see what you got.
Yeah, although I would make an argument about something, and this is a different topic, but the idea is that my preference, and this is what I show in Fast Track, especially for people that are just getting started, is that I do not utilize, not in the beginning, this. And so this is another thing that I was trying to be persuasive about with Roberto, and he agreed with me, is that first and foremost, this tool is for pre-processing. The idea of doing weighting, registration, and integration, those are convenience features. WBPP is not designed to fully implement those processes. It's just not designed to do it. It would be a different script if it were designed to fully do everything that's necessary for those elements. So those are what I call convenience elements. Now, can you do things with some data sets and get a reasonable result? Absolutely. But the big struggle that people have is that they try to implement this, go to bed, wake up, see some crazy integrated image, and wonder what went wrong. Right?
What happened?
And so what I show in Fast Track, and what I show in just about everywhere that I show it, is that I just output the calibrated data. I use WBPP to do that. These two other steps, I mean, there's just 2 steps. Come on. I do the 2 steps. They don't take that long. It's actually the calibration and debayering. That's what takes forever. The image registration depends, that might take some time. The image integration has recently been really sped up. So there's been some efficiencies that have come across, I guess, in the latest update of PixInsight. So image integration is now not a big deal. Registration, you can argue, it takes some time, but it's just 2 more steps. And by getting a chance to look at the calibrated data before you do these steps, I think is so beneficial, because here's the time savings. Which takes more time to do? Is it set it up, use the automated stuff here, go to bed, wake up in the morning, find out something's wrong, try to figure out what's wrong, go on the forum, ask someone what's wrong, get back to figuring it out, do it, maybe you get the right answer. Is that more or less than just calibrating the data, looking at the data to make sure it makes sense, and if it doesn't make sense, stop at that point and fix it, but otherwise continue to do these other 2 steps? I think that's the more efficient way to go. And it also really, especially for people that are just getting started, you really get to see the relationship between the data and the processes that you're doing. And I think there's really big value in that. One of the things that I try to stress is that the things that I explain go beyond the lesson. So you can take what you learn in terms of this idea, being able to look at data, look at the actual numbers or the images. You could take that beyond any steps that I might show, and save time, solve problems, be more creative, whatever it might be. That's what I also think is important, and that's what I think is lost if you don't look at the data. You just press the button and you get some problem and you don't know what the heck happened, right?
Yeah. Then you try to extrapolate a log file.
I got a perfect example for you. I saved it. Let me show you this example. It's just so perfect.
Okay.
It's perfect. It's just so perfect. So that is in F.
Gotta love when a plan comes
and that's
together.
in PixInsight. Oh gosh, yes, here. And then let's see. Here it is. So a guy posted on the forum, and this is what happens. He says, he posts, WPP does not work. It makes my stars disappear. If I use DSS with the image on the right, my stars are there. Why doesn't WBPP work? So this is the guy that he did what you did. He said, right? You try to process the image, you set it up, you think is correct. You press the button, you go to bed. You wake up and you end up with this thing on the left. How the heck can you figure out what happened just by looking at that thing on the left? Now, the way that the gentleman worded it was he said that his stars disappeared. That is not correct. That is not what happened. That's kind of what it looks like, but that isn't a full description of what you're seeing on the screen. What you're seeing on the screen is partially rejected data. What you're seeing there is the combination of data. Well, maybe I shouldn't say. Do either of you know what it is before I say it? Why do we have this thing on the... What is the reason that it ended up like this? He used WBPP.
Yeah, it's some sort of pixel rejection on there.
Well, yeah, it is because of rejection, but there's something prior to that caused the problem to begin with.
Was it multiple nights of data that didn't have the proper allocations like you were doing in that last set?
No, he probably only had one night. I don't know if he had one night or not, but it didn't matter. See, I see this all the time. I know exactly what it is. All the time.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
His frames weren't aligned. His frames were not aligned. They weren't registered. Now, he pressed the button in WBPP, and he said, go do it, right? And at the end, he gets this. Now, if he had gone back and looked at the output before he went into star registration, or I should say, he looks at the output of star registration before he goes into image integration, that's what I should say, he would have blinked the files and seen that they weren't aligned. So WBPP calibrated the data. Looks like it did it correctly. It looks like he configured that somewhat correctly, although I'd argue that there's probably an issue. And then it went to register the images. It didn't crash. It tried to do it, but at the end of the day, it didn't. And then finally combined them all together. And because of rejection, when you reject frames that are not aligned, this is what you get. Because the stars aren't all going to be in the same spot. They'll be roughly in the same spot, but not exactly.
Right.
So you get this weird faded result. That's what this is. So the question is, why didn't the frames align? And the reason is usually because, and I think it was in this case, that there are hot pixels. What generally happens is people that are using these one-shot color camera sensors, especially when they're taking short exposures, and this is especially true for CMOS sensors, they're noisy. And you have lots of hot and warm pixels that won't subtract perfectly with your dark frame. And the thing about registration is that PixInsight is so, how would be the word? It detects everything in the frame, right? And it looks for stars. But when you have short exposures, very short noisy images, the hot pixels look more like stars to the star registration, the star alignment routine, than the actual stars in the image do. So it aligns the image on hot pixels. Of course, hot pixels aren't moving, but at the end of the alignment process, it says, star alignment says, I succeeded. I aligned them on hot pixels. So what's the takeaway here is that there's a number of takeaways. One takeaway is that whenever you see a picture that looks like this, you wonder what happened when you integrated your images. Probably the images were not aligned. And then the other takeaway is that the images aren't aligned, probably because star alignment didn't detect stars properly. And that's probably because the data itself isn't either of good quality, could be slightly out of focus, or it's noisy and the calibration was poor. Now, were there hot pixels because, I mean, this could be a calibration problem. Maybe it wasn't being calibrated properly. Maybe he was trying to do dark frame optimization. It's a degenerate problem. There are lots of reasons why you can have extra hot pixels in your data.
Right.
However, I would argue that most of these problems are solved if you use cosmetic correction, and that, as I suspect, didn't happen here. Yeah, if you use cosmetic correction to remove hot pixels after you calibrate your data, a lot of this goes away. This would have been solved or avoided had you just used WBPP for just the calibration purposes.
Calibration only. Yeah.
Calibration only, meaning don't do the align, do everything, cosmetic correction, debayering, all of that, but no alignment. Align by manual, if you will, and then look at the result. And then you would instantly see, oh, hey, these aren't aligned. Why is that? And then hopefully you would know the reason why. I actually have a video. If you go to my YouTube channel, I have a video which actually demonstrates that, exactly this problem right here. So this idea that, WBPP is not working. This isn't a WBPP problem. WBPP uses processes in PixInsight, and it's using star alignment. It's a star alignment problem, not a WBPP problem. WBPP actually probably did a fine job, and its job is to calibrate data. So these extra things are convenience features. That's not a WBPP fault, and they're not fully implemented through this pipeline of WBPP because you don't have access to all of the little things that you might want to avoid certain kinds of problems.
Let me ask you this, Adam. Would you would you recommend getting into the habit of doing at least one template of cosmetic correction on your sensor?
I would.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I would. There is one small hiccup in that, and it deals with this drizzling thing. But I think we can put it to bed. I'm not ready to state that until I do some things. The problem with drizzle is that when you do rejection through WBPP, there was a default setting that's going to be changed. Again, it's one of these defaults in the rejection stuff, the stuff that you wouldn't have controlled. That's why you're not supposed to do it here. You're supposed to do it by going to image integration, directly. Don't make your final thing here because you just don't have access to everything. But anyway, aside from that, and I don't think that's going to be a problem in the next release. Yes, I would say that cosmetic correction it really does very little harm. And you can control how much cosmetic correction does its job. So the template that you're talking about is you would come to process, and then you'd go to cosmetic correction. I can't spell there.
Right.
And you would set it up. Now, my favorite method is just auto. One of the reasons why I use auto is that, now this is for hot pixels. So if you have defects, maybe you need to do this list, or you need to have a defect map or whatever. But just for hot pixel sake, the nice thing about auto is that it is agnostic when it comes to binning. You can put any dimension image, even if they're different dimensions, it doesn't matter. If you're using one of these other methods, like you're using the master dark method, well, you can only specify one master dark of one dimension, right? You'd have to have another template for the other binning, which doesn't make sense, right? Where then you have to do multiple runs through WBPP. I don't know. It gets confusing. So using the auto detect method here is what I think is the coolest thing to use. And you can control the amount of rejection here with auto detect. Sure. With the sigma value. The default happens to be good. However, one of the PixInsight TV episodes I have highlights exactly where defaults are not something that you want to live by, because you really need to understand. See, I have this whole thing here. Defaults are an illusion. Can you see the illusion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but it so happens this, 3 sigma is about right. But if you want more rejection, you would lower that. And the most important thing to do, and this is what I show in Fast Track, is sure, you set this value here, but then you know what you do? You go look in the console, which no one ever looks in, and you see how many pixels you're rejecting. If it says you have, well, let's say you have a chip that's 4,000 by 4,000 pixels. So you've got 16 million pixels, right? If you're rejecting 100 pixels out of 16 million, you're not rejecting very much at all. You would expect, see, these are like orders of magnitude, right? How many hot pixels would you say are in a picture? Probably 1,000, 500, many hundreds of pixels, right? So if you run cosmetic correction and you are rejecting 10,000 pixels, you might be, again, concerned. So the point is, I explained that you can look at more of this feedback of what the program's telling you to guide the decisions that you're making, to guide, what parameter you need to use. And then you can also verify in some sense that this parameter might actually be a good first guess. 3 sigma isn't that bad for many images.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, you're right. So you would make a template like this. If this is a monochrome chip, I would have to press the button here. If this was CFA, you'd give it a nice name like Cos Core, like that. And then you can use that
in WBPP.
Here.
Yeah.
In WBPP by turning on here and selecting it.
Yeah, this one.
Now it's in play as part of our processing.
Yep. Yeah, and Eric, you're gonna also, if you don't use that, you're gonna also see that when you take a look at the Tarantula Nebula data that we just got. There's a nice dead column right across the top from top to bottom. So we're gonna have to use that to get rid of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be, you can either do that way, or there's another way to do it. You can use the defect map. You can actually just create.
Yep.
You guys, okay, that's another way to do it. So you can use a defect map. Yep. So you could do it outside. It wouldn't be automated, but it's not automated, but it's easy enough to do. It's just one quick step. It gets rid of it.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, I learned that defect map from you.
Well, thank you, Adam. I really appreciate that. That's
right.
good to know.
I don't know
That
if
is
Let me
awesome.
see. Did I stop sharing? Let me see. Am I back?
No, you
Still
gotta
seeing
stop
your
sharing and
screen.
reconnect.
You have to
Yeah,
refresh.
you're still sharing.
Oh, I have to refresh. There it is, my refresh.
Yeah, you gotta reconnect the cam. There you go. You're in.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
Welcome
it.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you have something. I don't know if I convinced you, Eric, but that whole
No,
thing.
you have. Actually,
2
you have.
hours was because of your one comment on the last program. So there you go. That's what. So you
That is too
you got to
funny.
be careful what you say, or else I might come back and talk for another 2 hours.
I was going to say, what's Eric going to say next to get you back on for round 3?
No way.
That's a big foot that you put in your mouth, Eric.
I'm glad I did, because it's awesome to have Adam here and explain
Yeah,
this.
absolutely.
And he's definitely taught me something, and I can definitely see the value in using this script. It's a really cool script, and I can definitely understand how it be a really good learning tool.
Yeah, I just think that people can get a little insight, even as a beginner, into the calibration process by learning that stuff. And then you can even talk the same language, the right language, not the right language, but at least a common language when it comes to
Right.
some of the calibration process, and the different types of frames and different configurations. And I think that's really cool to be able to have that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank
So
you.
I think on a good note that Eric finally realized the second reason to use Pix Insight besides Blink. So
there it is.
But yeah,
and you know what?
Hey, listen. Go ahead.
Even him pointing out, really using WBPP in the process, especially for using it primarily for your calibration to get things set up, so, and then you can review, so you don't have, so you can review later and see how, your frames and everything, and see how things are looking before you go to that next step of alignment and, and then integration. So I like that idea as well.
There's another idea, which is that, earlier someone had mentioned how people save, even for the manual, they save those icons because it saves the setup.
Sure.
Well, you could now do that and even be more informed with WBPP, because you can save that whole configuration of all of those frames for some data set, being set up, and you can reload that again and see, okay, how did I set it up this last time, and then I can do it again for the next data set or something like that. So you can save the WBPP session, if you will, by making its own little instance. And then
nice.
and then load that up, and so you can save those instances with the little calibration flow diagram and the whole thing. So I think that could be useful too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can do that. Can you make that as and you have that? Can you make that as part of a project?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that way you can refer back to it. So you can have it as a project and bring back the project with all of the settings and everything.
Yes.
No, that's pretty cool.
Well, you should also be able to turn that into the little icon and move that over into your processes to be able to pull up as well, correct?
Yep. And you can save
you can save it as an icon. You can save
and
it,
then you can
do
recall that
both.
process.
Yeah,
you just got to remember, because WBPP is a script. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam. You just got to remember to run that in the global context.
Yeah, global context, right?
Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't run like a regular process. It runs like a script. So you just got to remember to. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that, because at least this way, using it and saving it as a project, you can go back actually to that process of when you're working with that specific piece of data and that information, because you can have, because of course we have different projects, and you can refer back, okay, when I was working on this data here on such and such a day, I can now, you can refresh your memory on, okay, this is what I did with WBPP for this instance. But what if, you know, things had to change and you have another set of data at a different time? So this way you can look and you can compare and you can see different things and say, okay, you know, and it'll help you understand a little bit more and maybe learn a bit more about your different processes and your workflows when you have to do these different, you know, when you're processing different types of data. So that's, you know,
really another cool thing you can do is you can set up WBPP, for example, to just generate your calibration library. So if you wanted just to make masters because you have a whole bunch of data, and then you could even do it across different configurations, maybe at different cameras. I mean, I don't know. You can imagine grouping different cameras together because maybe you have I know some people that image with a refractor, and you know they have the other camera going as well. So if they want to create masters across both of those all in one go, they could with a grouping keyword, and then just load up the master load up all the raw biases and darks and flats across the two cameras, and then they can generate everything in one go, and they can just leave that as a saved thing, so they can just do it again whenever they have new data. So.
That's really cool. So I'm seeing that there are a lot of benefits, you know, to using, you know, this script. There's some huge benefits of using Pix Insight. You know, it's a really, really powerful tool for image processing and, you know, and post processing. I mean, it's well worth the money, you know, for the amount of time, the amount of money we spend on, I said this before, the amount of money we spend on the equipment that we purchase, you know, we can spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, depending on what you're doing, to spend, you know, this is a small percentage of that, you know, and same thing with, and even going back to Adam's, you know, his website and the things that he teaches you to help you with this incredible piece of software. It helps, you know, there's been so much talk, and I'll even say this for me as well, I'll include me in this conversation. It's so intimidating, you know, when you first get started.
Definitely.
You know, but with your help and with, you know, just spending $60 on Fast Track or $180, you know, on fundamentals to get that knowledge, you know, that you have, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, especially with the amount of money you've been putting into, you know, this hobby, you know, it's a no-brainer. Yeah. So it's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
I like this.
You actually have a question, Adam.
Yeah.
You have a question. It's not necessarily Pix Insight, but it is definitely related. It's about dithering. Tyler J asked, are there any downsides of using a heavy dither as opposed to others?
Not really, as opposed to, I don't know what the others are, but I mean, just dithering
in general. Like a small or very small dither or very large dither. I think that,
you know, if you're only dithering in a small number, maybe 1 or 2 pixels instead of going, you know, for, you know, you
so
dither
I think that,
larger number.
I think the answer is that once you are sufficiently dithered, I don't know that going beyond a certain amount is beneficial. At least I'm not aware of any property that would be true. So it's not going to do you any harm. It may not be doing you any good. One thing, of course, is when you become large enough, there is, you know, when you dither at the edges of the frames, there's going to be regions where you don't overlap between the frames. And so you're cutting out some of, you know, you're going to make some of those areas less usable. But, and that even depends on the number of frames you have, by the way. But other than that, no, I don't think if the loss of the edges is not a big deal, then I know there's no real downside. But once you've gotten to sufficient dither, you're good. You don't want to be too small, though, because you can get these correlations between the pattern of the dither, basically going back on itself, and also between if you have a fixed pattern noise, have that walking noise problem with some of the CMOS sensors when you're doing short exposures, especially the color filter array type. Too small a dither will lead to those kinds of problems. So you're big enough, you can randomize all of that, and that's good. That's a good way to be. Good place to be. Okay. Before we wrap up, and I don't know, we should have wrapped up, I'm sure, but because you guys have your fingers on the pulse of astrophotographers and what they're doing, and I have this TV show that I'm trying to put on, and I'm always looking for ideas. What if you were to just say, what would interest you that you would be interested in seeing on an episode like Pix TV? Of course, it is geared towards Pix Insight, so I'm not showing acquisition of data. It's a Pix Insight thing. But if you had a thing, what do you think would be the popular thing to see that I might put on my list of shows?
Good question.
I would say that there's a lot of people out there that undersample their images, and how drizzling could help them get some of that resolution back.
Yeah, drizzling. Okay.
Yes, I would
now,
probably.
You guys are doing some work for me. I'm writing it down. Okay, drizzle.
That's right. That's what we do.
Sounds like he's in one of our weekly meetings that we haven't been doing as often as we used to.
Yeah. Well, weekly meeting what?
Well, it started out that way.
What did you think, Eric? Did you have something that you imagined?
And other things are, some of the newer pieces that are, on some of the newer scripts and things that are that have come out, such as, with the StarNet plus and things like. I don't know if you've touched on that, on how to use it or anything like that, or how that would work.
I actually did that in the whatever episode. Yes, I did touch on that a little. Probably first episode. I touched on it a little bit, but I think there's a lot more there. So that's a good one.
Yeah. So something like that, because there's so many of the there's all these new scripts that are coming out, and and people are wanting to try these things, and maybe if you have the opportunity to some of the more popular scripts that have come out, and show a little bit on that may not be too bad.
One of the funny things is of course that when a new script becomes available, no one is an expert. I mean, sure. So I don't even know, because I haven't had a chance to run it through some images that might be appropriate to it or something like that. So it's funny, but it takes time, even though it might be a new thing. No one can be an expert in a new thing that quickly unless you were a part of the development of the thing. Then it helps. But other than that,
because I know there was what is it? I'm pulling my pics on tech because I'm drawing a blank here. The Easy Processing Suite. That's one that came. That was not too bad.
So that isn't that. Obviously, I am geared more towards gaining a deeper understanding of concepts and processes and everything, although I want still that holistic thing. So the Easy Suite for me is not a priority for me. I probably should delve into it. I haven't yet. There's still so much to do that isn't simplified, actually. Isn't a simplification. It's that simplifies some stuff, right? By going through those processes. So,
and maybe another one is, and I'm sure, and I know you've already done this, but on in fundamentals, but maybe touch a bit more, maybe going back on pixel math.
Oh, I'd love to do that one. I think it's a fun. I love pixel math, but I think unfortunately I don't think it has it doesn't have the cachet. It just doesn't have what people. Their eyes glaze over. It's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah. I got something for you.
What's that?
How about how to incorporate, let's say, 2 different telescopes and 2 different cameras and put them in the same image?
Yeah. So that's I don't know that that's a one-part thing, but that's
it is.
That's what that's like. If you're familiar with Rob Gendler's work, He's
Yeah.
putting not only different cameras and images, but literally different, telescope wavelengths and all that stuff together. So that's that's it. Those are ambitious type projects. Those are tough. I think, unfortunately, I am not an expert in the narrowband work, but that's probably an area that I need to do more work with, because that's certainly one that I think I would be able to contribute in a way that just because I would look at it differently. I'm so used to doing just broadband that I would apply a lot of my broadband technique to narrowband, and I would hope that it would do things differently, maybe is currently done, and maybe that'd be better, maybe not. I don't know. But that's something I really want to get into, and I haven't gotten into yet. So mostly because of the fact I just don't have much data. But
well, all you have to do is move to like a Bortle 8 sky, like me, and that's all you will do is narrowband. So
I understand.
So that's it.
I totally understand that.
He's not going to get much of that down there on Mount Lemon.
Yeah.
No.
Because what are you, Bortle 2, Bortle 3 over there?
Yeah. So Mount Lemon, one of my jobs is to measure the sky from Mount Lemon, actually using that telescope. So no pretty pictures. It just goes around and takes pictures of starfield sky, and then you read. Yeah, and then you read. Well, there's a correlation. We actually have a true SQM sky meter, but we're doing photometry with the telescope as well. So data through these different scientific filters, and then we calculate the brightness of the sky through the telescope. And it's at zenith through the Johnson V filter. It's 21.5. So that is a dark sky. But it's not as dark as it could be, but it's pretty dark. And then when you get lower in the sky, of course, the glow of the surrounding cities and things all raise that sky brightness just significantly. If you really want to see, I can show you a picture of the maps that I make, basically.
Another thing that I was thinking about, because Adam was, because I know Dan has helped me out with this, and we were utilizing Pix Insight to measure out the star brightness of my images to help me understand, if I'm overexposing, if my full well depth is, if I'm overflowing, or if I'm ideal, to help me get an idea of if I'm exposing properly. And I don't know if that's something you would touch base on or anything like that. But
well, I think I start the ball rolling in Fast Track, in the sense that I just get people to literally look at pixel values as a thing, as a regular thing you should do. People often just, they see an image in front of them, it looks noisy, and they start doing things. But actually look at those values as you go through the processing. And that helps to answer a question like what you're asking. The other part of your question deals with basically an understanding of bit depth, an understanding of how many values per bit space you're working in. So 16-bit is 65,000, whereas 12-bit is only whatever half and half and half if that is. 16,000, whatever that is. So you an understanding of that, and then you can say, well, okay, this camera records linearly up until this point, and then you have a certain number of electrons that you store, or you can count, or whatever it is, and then that's it. That's your saturation value, and then you say, okay, well, I just got to be a little bit less than that. I'm okay. Right. Yeah, less than that, you're okay. It's a funny thing, though. One of the things that I find people get hung up on, and I mentioned this in my story on galaxies in the Sky and Telescope article, a lot of people get really hung up on the stars, and they do it at the expense, I think, of maybe some other thing that's the actual thing of interest in the picture, if it's the nebula or the galaxy. They're really worried about whether their stars are saturated, right? So for me, I tend to make an artistic choice that I don't worry so much about the stars and I go more for the object. So those are the kind of decisions that you make. So yes, understanding where saturation is one thing, but saturation in and of itself, you know, can be okay if it's not otherwise affecting the aesthetic quality of the image. So it
Right.
kind of depends, right? You don't want to saturate your galaxy, but
And that's my exact point. I was just using stars as an example, but say let's look at M31 for example. You have a bright core with
yeah,
M31,
yeah,
so using that, and then say you're taking some test shots of it, and then you're bringing those FITS files into PixInsight, and you're taking a
yeah,
look at that K value of
yes,
hovering over. Get
yep,
helping using that to give you an idea of I'm shooting too long. I need to tone it down because by the time I'm done and I'm going to start processing this, my core is going to be
a mess.
definitely.
Yeah.
It's going to be totally blown out, and now I have to do other steps within PixInsight to
well,
maybe control it a bit better.
Let me say something based on what you just said, let me say something that might be an adjustment to what you said. So in a single frame, if you are, well, let me say two things. First thing is, for a single exposure, right?
Mm-hmm.
The core of M31 might be saturated by a little bit. Maybe you do a 5-minute exposure and you see a little bit of saturation of the core. Because you measure it, you measure the value, not how it appears on the screen. That's just a screen stretch. The only thing that matters is that K value.
Right.
So and now I'm going to give you a rule of thumb, which is, roughly, maybe you want the core to be the same size as a typical saturated star, because nothing in your picture is going to be more resolved than a typical star. Stars are the best resolution you get. So the core of a galaxy, given everything else, should be star-like. That's how big it should appear. So if you're doing undersampled data, it should look like a little tiny few pixels. If you're taking a picture through a big telescope, maybe it's a blob that's the size of all the other blobby stars in the picture. But that's how big. That's how long you might want to go, unless it doesn't matter, because if there's no detail that you feel like you're going to end up displaying in the core, you let the core go. You're not going to display it at the end of the picture anyway. There's no big benefit if there is some extra benefit of doing a longer exposure. But let's say that's not the direction you were going. Here's the part that I was going to also highlight, is you said that when you add all the images together, the core would blow up. Well, it wouldn't blow up in terms of saturation, because it will be no more blown up than a single exposure. You don't saturate or clip when you combine all that data, because you're generally taking the average. So you won't be any worse off than the single subframe that you took. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess taking that single subframe and bringing it into PixInsight, as a test, so to know, okay, am I exposing, or are my exposures long enough, too long, or are they too short, something like that. That's exactly kind of what I was going for, because you're exactly right. When you integrate everything, it's an average, so
so you're not going to get any worse. Right.
No,
you're not going to get, but that is a common maybe misconception for people that are starting, which is that, you combine that information and maybe you somehow need to compensate for the fact that you are, you're going to do some short exposure and then you're combining them and it's going to grow in some sense. It doesn't work that way, because you're basically averaging the data. So what you're ending up with is a much, an image that has much, much less noise, and you're going to be able to detect fainter and fainter signal, but it doesn't somehow increase the blowing up of nuclei of galaxies or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. No.
Yeah.
Perfect. And that's exactly, because that was actually what I was thinking about is, when you're taking a look at certain objects, and they are quite bright, some are quite bright. And for example, I'm imaging, the horse head, but I'm doing it in narrowband. So, the star there, and I can't remember the name of the star right off the top of my head. Thank you, Altenac. It's not as
Alnitak. Yeah.
Alnitak.
Alnitak. Sorry, my bad.
It is using a narrowband filter. Of course, right now it's very well controlled.
Yeah.
But when you get towards you're doing some broadband, because this is right now I'm planning on doing an HA RGB. My first. I'm actually learning monochrome, because I've always used one shot color, so I got a monochrome camera, so I'm learning monochrome a little bit. Right. But those are the things. It's like taking a look at that, and and then tomorrow I'm probably going to start doing my RGB, and looking at those values and saying, okay, I need to settle it down. I don't need, because of course I understand I won't need to expose as much, or expose as long rather, with my broadband and my broadband filters than I would within my narrowband. I understand that, but it's just looking at, taking those simple quick test shots, bringing them into PixInsight and understanding, all right, I'm reaching that well depth, I'm getting too close to that well depth, that well depth limit, that I need to maybe tone it down as far as my exposure time.
But for me, that this is a good case where I would let the star go if it doesn't in some way, it depends on your optical system. Some people's optics, it's not so much the star itself, it's the glare of the star, the scattered light of the star. That's where the problem is. Alnitak itself, it can blow up and be a big, brilliant ball of light. And if it were clean, that'd be okay with most people, I think. It's all the scattered light that tends to be the problem. So the fact that you have a big saturated ball there, I don't know that I would go crazy over that, because it might still be a good idea to expose long enough to get that, that nebulosity to show. But that needs to be tempered with the fact that if you have lots of scattered light, or a big halo, or rays of because you have a turned down edge, whatever it is, then you might need to control things for those reasons. Yeah.
Sure. And I know I come across that, especially right now I'm using my refractor, but definitely when I'm using my faster f2 RASA, for example, that definitely, it can get to a point where you definitely would see, because of those fast optics, and you're bringing into such a light bucket, that you would definitely, even at short, even if I go any longer, for example, than maybe a minute on it, then definitely the stars will, you can start seeing halos and, haloing effects and stuff like that. So, but no, that's good too. That's good to know. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm going to do this as fast as I can. So this is my website, and I just want to show you the counter example, which is something that looks like this. So that's Betelgeuse. And the cool thing about it is that I just decided one day, well, what happens if you don't care? What do you get? If you just let the Betelgeuse just go, what does the field look like? Because no one bothers to take 10-minute exposures of Betelgeuse and then add all those together, hours of data. But this is what you get. It's just kind of cool. I just want to say that, the funny thing is we're always trying to manage those bright stars. But sometimes it's fun, just to, take a picture of the bright star and kind of see the realms, the region,
what's around it. Exactly. Because you've got some great, nebulosity around there, some great clouds, so that's awesome.
Now, the worst example of that is, this is the worst example. This is so hard. So this is Venus.
Oh, wow.
That's that's Venus and the Pleiades when they were together in the sky.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
hard to do. That's hard to do as a natural exposure. This is natural. There was no funny business. A lot of people, they took Venus and then they took a nice sky picture when Venus wasn't in the way and they put it together. No, that's not what this is. This is actually the real thing. I think it's probably one of the better examples of a natural Venus and Pleiades. You can just barely see some of the nebulosity there, but you can see it.
Yeah, you can see it, but yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. Holy cow.
Yep. That's crazy.
Is there, for you personally, I know you do this for a living, and you have tons of photos here, but is there any, and I don't know if I've asked you this in the past when we last talked, but is there any particular type of objects that you enjoy? If you could pick certain objects, nebulae, open clusters, globulars, things like that you really enjoy imaging those and looking at that type of data and and that stuff.
I am a celestial omnivore, so I enjoy. Yeah, I do. I think that I enjoy it all. I think that for me, I like to go at. It's harder to do today. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, there were many, many, many things that you could take pictures of that literally there were not a color picture of anywhere, not in a book, not on the internet. And so some of the pictures that I took 10, 12, 15 years ago, even more recently than that, there were no examples of them anywhere. And that has that's interesting. That's not a situation that many people find themselves in now, but it is in a different kind of pleasure to process an image where you don't know the answer, right? Because now you're processing not based on someone else's image, not based on what you expect it to be, not based on anything, but the data that you have in hand.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of experience, actually, to be able to produce that image, render it in a way. And of course, what I like to do is to share those kinds of images with people. A good example of something recent was something that a friend of mine allowed me to do, but it was his telescope, and he allowed me to work with this image. This is a good one of the type. This is something I took many years ago, but you probably have never seen this nebula before, right?
No.
So no. You've never seen that one. But let me show you another one. There are all of these of this kind. So this is another one. I just think this is the coolest thing. So this is part of the Taurus molecular cloud. But to see a high resolution image of this part of the cloud is just spectacular, I think.
Wow.
And there are no, nice color pictures of this part of the cloud. There just isn't. And it's a very interesting field. This is a CW Tauri. It's one of these T Tauri type stars. Mm-hmm. Very young protostar like stars. I believe it's this one here. Mm-hmm. And do you see there's a little jet coming out there? Like one of those Herberg-Haro type objects there. Here.
Yeah.
And it's probably because of this star here that got sent out. It's probably, I know there are papers that indicate there's another thing close into the star. You can't resolve it, but it's in there somewhere. I don't know. That kind of stuff interests me. So that's my favorite type of object. It's something that I haven't done before and something that I can share with people that they probably haven't seen before. I mean, that's kind of the fun of being able to share, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But then again, this is a different kind of example where everyone knows what this is. Everyone knows that this is the Witch Head Nebula, and that's Rigel, and all of that stuff. Yeah. But can you take a picture of a field and present it in a way, a field that's so famous, and present it in a way that is different, or that adds something that makes people pause when they see it? And for me, I think an image like this does that. When I first published this, I got a very good response to this image because it is different than what this is a broadband image, no narrow band, nothing here. This is broadband. And it really shows off the natural kind of interplay of the colors and light that are in this part of the sky. And so that's a different take on, the kind of things that I like to do. If I can bring something new to an image or a target or something, that gets me really excited too. And I really felt that when this was coming together, I was feeling that. You don't always get that, right? Some images, there's sometimes objects are just simply not, there is nothing I can do with this object to make it more appealing than that. That's just it. It just is, right?
No.
It's a little ball with a little pink and a little blue, and that's just what it is. It's in a field of stars, and that's just it. Now, it's a very good picture of it, but no one's going to, publish this anywhere. And people, if I show that to them, they're not going to get terribly excited about that.
But that previous picture of you showed.
Look at a little galaxy down there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So the connoisseurs.
You got a little galaxy there.
The connoisseurs.
There he is.
Will enjoy it.
Yeah. But to your point, like you're saying, that previous photo of the Witch Head Nebula in Rigel, that's breathtaking because it's not necessarily focused on what most people, when you're thinking of this, they focus probably more on just the witch head, and getting that in the center of your shot, in the center of, making that the focal point. Here, you're looking at so much more that's around it.
This is a 4-panel mosaic, so it's a lot of sky actually. This is a four-panel mosaic. Yeah.
Wow. And do you and you mostly because you mentioned this, you do a lot of most of your imaging is in broadband, correct?
Yeah, almost all of it. I've only done
all of it.
Yeah, that's all. Now, in the past, I've had opportunities when I worked at with the Schulman telescope to do some HA enhancement. So a super good example of that. I don't even know if I have it here because it's an older picture. Oh, geez. I'm sure if I do M1 atom block, that should get me close. Yeah. APOD. No. Do I really not? My goodness. Yes. I think that's it. So this image, I'm actually quite proud of because I think that of all the hydrogen alpha blending I've ever done, this is probably one of my better. Part of the problem with hydrogen alpha blending is that it often will, especially in something very intricate like this, it tends to either overwhelm or taint the broadband nature of the object, right? Now, if this were just strictly narrowband, that's a whole different thing. But this is supposed to be a broadband image. It's supposed to be an image that looks like, if you will, a broadband image, but it has this enhancement. And if I didn't tell you the enhancement was there, you might not have even known. But it certainly is. I could not have achieved this result in just broadband alone. The extra HA really helped the overall filamentary nature of this, and it helped contrast these other features which are bluish and greenish and so on. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. It really, really is.
Good stuff. Yeah. So this I did in that same year, 2012. 2012 was apparently a pretty good year for me.
Is there a particular region of the sky that you are that you enjoy going to, more than maybe another?
I found it over and over again. I have found that the Taurus molecular cloud just has the strangest things that are so cool. Like this is an example here, and the other example I showed, actually all three examples I showed, they're all in the Taurus molecular cloud. So they're surprising in what the mix of, the dust and just small bits of, there's no big nebula. It's just little bits of highlights and dust and activity. Yeah, it's really a strange place. To me, it reminds me of, if you've ever been to Utah, Utah has the strangest stuff, right? It has arches and it has the hoodoos and it has all kinds of slot canyons. If you just were to fly across the landscape, not necessarily would you see it, but when you're down there and you look in detail at all these things, it's a crazy place. So the Taurus molecular cloud reminds me, it's like the Utah of the sky. You visit this part of the sky, and they're just the strangest things. And it is, they're paralleled in the sense that a lot of this is the erosion or shaping of the gas and the dust in that region of star formation. It's one of the nearest regions of star formation, right? So
right.
I think that's the surprising answer is the Taurus molecular cloud. Lots of weird things
now,
in there.
That particular photo, what type of optics did you use? Because
This one here?
Yes.
So this would have been the 32-inch telescope on Mount Lemmon. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because that's that's quite detailed. You have that is great magnification there. So there's a lot of detail there. So wow.
Sorry. Yeah, that's one of the nice things. Now there's certainly a benefit to the top of Mount Lemmon. It allows you some of that resolution, which is good. But then again, like the other picture I showed, which is the wide field stuff, I mean, these kinds of things. This is just with the astrograph, so there isn't that much detail, but the overall picture is, it's really nice.
Yeah, and Roe is probably one of my favorite summer targets.
Of course, yeah. I mean, how could it not be? It is just the most spectacular. You can probably see my picture of it right behind me, actually.
Yeah, it's absolutely one of my favorites, and I can't wait to image it again this year, and and see how better I've gotten at it than the previous years. So that's one of my favorites there. No, you've got some great stuff here, Adam, on your website, and it's just absolutely incredible.
Awesome.
And it gives you, and it gives me some ideas of maybe taking some of these images that you've done and give me some ideas of certain targets that I may have never thought about in the past. Because as when you're first getting into imaging, a lot of times you're going for the more you work on the more common targets, the M42, the M31s, and going through the Messier catalog and things like that. But you don't think about sometimes, there's so much more out there, and having an opportunity to go and look, at a site like yours gives you some really good ideas of other things that are out there that you might want to take a chance and say, you know what, I want to see that for myself, how I can do that, and get there. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying, today, so many imagers producing so many pictures compared to what it was 15, 20 years ago that there's almost an overwhelming number of choices and things you can think about visiting and checking out and stuff. So it's really interesting.
Good.
It's different.
Yeah, it definitely is. I know it's getting late here, so
what is it, like 11? It's almost midnight for you guys.
Yeah,
I'm already sleeping. I've been quiet for 25 minutes.
Right.
All right. You better let Daniel go.
No. It's all good, man. This is what we do. We do this every Wednesday, and we say we're gonna do an hour and a half, and it ends up to be 3 hours. So
unless I put a timer on them, they don't shut up.
Yeah, we don't. we just have so much fun with this hobby and talking about these different things and bouncing ideas off our heads and helping other people, giving them, ideas and thoughts and things to try. So, this can go on for hours if we let it.
Well, and Adam, it's not very often that we get somebody that's invested as much time in this career and this hobby that we get to pick your brain and gain an insight into some of these things that you've had influence in. So we deeply appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys letting me come on. Thank you very much.
No
Adam, the invite's always open to come on back, and when you got something new coming on, absolutely, you're the first one. So come on down and maybe hang out with us again.
One of these days, I'll have to venture down to Tucson and see if we can meet up.
All right, that'd be good.
Well, thank you. And I'm definitely,
all right,
guys. If you guys haven't had a chance to, definitely check out Adam Block's website. Check out, his fundamentals, his fast start, Pix TV, it's
fast track.
Fast track. Thank you. Fast track. Yeah, you got me there. So good. But it's an incredibly valuable. It's a great resource, for Pixel site, especially for us that are, especially for us new guys and us newbies and who get sometimes intimidated by that software. So he makes it. You explained it so well to help us understand it. So thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I offer you guys a
So,
good night.
thank you so much. We're going to stand for a couple of more minutes.
Okay.
But thank you so much, Adam. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
You're welcome.
Stay safe.
All right. You too.
All right.
Oh, awesome. That was cool. You're
killing me, man. You're killing me.
Hour and a half was the Eric show.
He is the man. I
know.
He's a wealth of knowledge, man, and I get, whenever I get a chance to, to tap into someone with that type of knowledge, dude.
Yeah, we can tell. We can tell, man.
Someone's got to get up at 6 a.m.
It's going to turn into the Eric show for a minute.
It did.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, guys. It's all good.
Forget about the 6 questions that I had. It's okay. I couldn't get a word in.
Yeah.
But, so just really, really quick, and before I'm going to show you, we did get our first bit of data from Telescope Live. And if I could share it real quick, just so you could see what we're getting now. It's not everything, but I do have one picture up. Let's see, open recent image files and H alpha. Okay, so keep in mind that this is a 5-minute shot, and I'm going to share it in a second. A 5-minute shot of the Tarantula Nebula and H alpha from the telescope in Chile. So, where's my thing here? And share screen and share, and then what the hell? There we go. Jesus. And there you go. So, remember what we were talking about with the cosmetic correction, right? There it is.
Yep.
See that line?
Yep.
That's one of them. And that's the worst one.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're going to have to make a defect map on this, and you can actually see some hot pixels here. I definitely see some issues with the stars a little bit, but
it's like some focus issues or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks like something's going on there. I don't know if it's focus or if it's maybe I forget which scope we're using, but I'm seeing some. I don't know. Maybe it's a flat. I don't know. Are we using a fractal? I don't remember.
No,
we're using an RC.
I think
we're using an RC, but that to me seems, because it's similar in all the corners, maybe there's a slight back focus issue.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the back focus isn't quite right.
I'm gonna let him know about that, because I just noticed that now. I didn't zoom in that far, but I'm seeing the center looks decent, and then the outside is not very good.
Yeah. I'd vote back focus because I'm seeing it in all 4 corners. I would have voted
I'm
tilt
seeing all
because
4
it was
corners
a little bit heavier in the upper.
Well,
left.
yeah, it's definitely not tilt, but I mean, you're looking at it back here, it looks great. And that's an H alpha shot. That's one 5-minute shot, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to talk to him about the I guess the back focus issue that it looks like he has, because I know that they were doing work on this telescope.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that that's what they were working on, and they're just tightening it up. But if that's the case, I'm going to get a refund on those, on at least some of the shots. I'm going to blink through them and see.
Yeah.
I'm still seeing your screen.
Yeah, I gotta go back reconnect.
There we go. You got to reconnect. There you
He's
go.
reconnecting. Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's the first set of data from the third and the fourth. So the data is coming in. So we do have 2 filters, and they'll be up on the website probably tomorrow. So you'll be able to download the first set of data and calibration files for the H alpha and the S2 that we shot last night. So the data's coming in. For those of you guys that have put money into this thing, I appreciate it, and we all appreciate it, and we're all going to get the data, and it's on its way. So things are finally moving.
Very cool. Very cool.
Things are finally moving, so it's going to be good.
Yeah. Well, I'm taking a look here, and I'm doing not too bad. My guiding is, I don't know, maybe there's a little wind. I'm doing the horse head right now, so maybe there's just a little wind there.
I got to work at Camera Concepts tomorrow, so.
Yeah, so we gotta hit it, so it's all good. Hopefully, this will come out decent. So we'll see. Anyway,
I'm sure it will. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So slight disappointment, guys. I'm in Albuquerque, so my daughter can't come close out the show tonight. Yeah, she'll be back next week, I promise.
Yeah, we passed our bedtime right now. We would have probably been done a long time ago.
I know, we didn't have that timer, man.
I wasn't going to put a timer on Adam.
No, but and soon.
So Mark Ellis is like, what type of scope is it? It is an RC. It's not collimation, because if it was collimation, it'd be all over. So I really have a feeling it's definitely to what Jason said. I really think it has to do with backspacing.
Yeah, it has to be sort of a focus issue.
Yeah, so I will forward that to Marco and to Alex over at Telescope Live, and tell them that they have a little bit of a problem.
So yeah, I'm still waiting. I think it's 10 more days, I believe. Then I'm hoping I would get my my precise part, to come in. So
wait a minute, are they open? Are they open? Do they have people working there? Because it's to the point where I sent them an email from the Camera Concept, so they didn't know it was me.
And they still haven't answered.
They have not answered a phone call. 5 emails since February 18th.
Oh my God.
No phone call answered. And I know this lady's name. Her name is Ashley from Precise Parts. No, nothing from them.
Wow.
0.
Holy cow.
Nothing in my spam. Nothing on my cell. I gave him my phone number. I gave him 2 emails. And now I sent them today. I sent them an email from the Camera Concepts Gmail account, and saying it was Jeffrey, that I'm the owner. So I lied. I said I was him. Saying I got a good customer that's trying to get an adapter.
Right.
I'm trying to get this adapter for this aside. Not that it matters, because my scope's traveling all over the country now.
Yeah.
Well, my scope went to Arkansas, to Tyler.
Right.
And he sent me some pictures of the lens, and it looks like there may be some dust in between the cell.
So you gotta get that back over.
Yeah, so I sent an email to Skywatcher, I guess 2 days ago, or yesterday maybe, and he's like, "Oh yeah, well when'd you buy it?" And I was like, I looked it up and I got my receipt, and I have it on. I bought it from OPT, so I looked up my receipt and it said March 9th, 2019. So he's like, "Dude, you got like 6 days before the warranty runs out. Just send it in. We'll do it for free."
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So I sent Tyler the RMA FedEx slip, because since he has my scope, I sent him the slip. So now it's going from Arizona to Skywatcher, wherever that is. So
wow.
So it's going from New York to Arizona to Skywatcher, back to me.
Jeez. It's
And
crazy.
Andrew Marco is trying to rub salt in your wound there, saying, "Where's
What
your
happened?
Where's your 120?
where's your 120?" I was told if we
Well,
ordered today, you'd get them
I-
in June.
Yeah, right. That's not going to happen. So Andrew, I did call up and I spoke to my contact over at Skywatcher, and they still are on pace for late March. So, and I ordered mine in October. And if you order, I don't know who you were told by. Maybe somebody got, because they have been putting out scopes, Skywatcher and Celestron, to the heavy hitter distributors such as OPT, High Point Scientific on the East Coast. Those guys who order in bulk like that, they've been promising them scopes for a while, and they're starting to get it in. So they may have some dribs and drabs coming in. It's possibly true, Andrew. I'm not calling you a lie. I'm sure it is true. So it's just that it's frustrating for me, for somebody who ordered it October 12th, that now 5 months later, I may be getting it. I hope. So hey, listen, you know what? They may have it. Now I'm curious to go in tomorrow and see how long for a if I order one today, how long. I'm wondering if I could get it earlier, but who knows? Hopefully, it's just taking forever. It's just taking forever. I know, and it's not just Skywatcher, it's Celestron, it's everybody. It's Astrophysics, it's Lunt. I mean, it's Daystar, it's everybody. Anybody who makes their stuff out of China is in this position. Anybody who makes their lenses or even just their tubes out of China, it's taking forever.
It's taking forever.
So
yeah, I mean,
and it's just horrible. And that's not even to talk about the issues that we have. It's not even an issue; it's a good issue. That the popularity of astrophotography due to the COVID crisis has skyrocketed. Everybody buying telescopes. And that's one of the reasons why we're in the position that we're in with the shortages of basic equipment. Of simple telescopes, that $200 telescopes I can't get because everyone's buying them.
Maybe
But,
eventually it's gonna get back to normal, and people are gonna get back to their normal lives, and they're gonna start going to the movie theaters and restaurants and leaving the astrophotography and astronomy back to us, so we can start getting gear at a regular time in a decent time.
all I want to do, this is all I want to do, and this is how we're gonna end it. It's midnight. This is how we're gonna end it because I know Jason's got a long day tomorrow. We all got to work.
I gotta work.
So just let's close it out here. All I want to do, I got a movie theater right down the block, and it's got a full-blown top shelf bar, a griddle, steaks, whatever you want. Like, I mean, it's $100 a night, no matter, or more. Depending on how much you drink, and not watch the movie. But all I want to do is see Dune. That's all I want to do. I want Dune to come out, and I want Dune to come out. I have been talking about this movie for 30 years. I've been talking about this movie, and it's ready to come out. And what happens? They close all the freaking movie theaters.
Yeah, close them all.
Come to Arizona. Our movie theaters are open.
But now they're opening. Are yours? Because I know that AMC is opening back up. A lot of AMCs are opening back up.
Yep.
So,
well,
there's
a lot of stuff going on out there. Fauci's going ballistic because he thinks that he's going nuts. I mean, I give the guy all the credit in the world for the AIDS crisis and everything. He's a brilliant guy, but you know what? He's going off that because he's saying that every governor is going to screw this thing up because he's telling everybody to take off masks, and we didn't vaccinate enough people yet. But and we don't know what's going to go on. But you know what? I just want to see the movie. That's it. That's all I care about.
All right,
that's
so
it.
we've done our sci-fi tangent. Dan wants to see the darn movie. Hurry up! That's it. To see the big movie.
And now I want to see the insides of my eyelids because
there you go.
I got to go to bed.
You see me rubbing my eyes, right?
Oh God!
All right, man.
All right. 12:01, guys. Guys, have a good night. Remember to keep imaging, keep educating, keep having fun, and I'm going to bed.